Imagine you're 19, you got nothing. No car, no savings, your mom's behind on rent, and you've been rapping in your bedroom since you were 12. Then one day, a man in a suit slides a piece of paper across the table and tells you there's a check attached to it. $500,000. More money than anybody in your family has ever seen at one time, and you think anybody's reading that contract? Nah, you're signing. You're signing right there with the pen shaking in your hand, because for the first time in your life, somebody's telling you you're worth something, and they're proving it in cash. But here's what they don't tell you. That check ain't a gift, it's a loan. It's an advance against royalties you haven't earned yet, and every dollar of it, the studio time, the videos, the tour buses, the jewelry they let you flex, all of it comes out of your side, not theirs. So you can go platinum, sell out arenas, have the biggest song in the country, and still owe the label money. That's not a bad break. That's the business model. So today we're going through the artists who got finessed, the 360 deals, the 15-year contracts, the managers who owned the masters, the publishing splits nobody explained, and the guys who found out years too late that they were basically employees of their own career. And we're starting with a name that's gonna hurt because everybody watched this one happen in real time. Blueface, signing to Wack 100.
I always knew Blueface was pretty stupid. I'm gonna tell you why. Blueface is signed to Wack 100 and managed by Wack 100. Let me tell you how this works. When you sign to a label, they take at least half already. Then you're getting managed by the guy who owns the label. So of your 50% that you're getting, or less than 50%, he's still taking at least 20% of that too. It's double dipping. You get what I'm saying?
I look at his wife at the time like, excuse me, man, like, would you insist on your son signing this right here? Like, like if I was your son, would you recommend this? She's like, yeah, I would. And I signed at that time. That was like my confirmation.
No lawyer, no nothing.
No lawyer, no nothing.
Okay.
Wack 100 was supposed to be Blueface's manager and business partner, but instead, he's been finessing him out of millions for years. Let's take a look at how one of hip-hop's most controversial managers pulled off one of the industry's biggest scams right in front of our eyes. Wack 100 is a music manager and industry veteran from Los Angeles, best known for managing controversial artists and making headlines with his outspoken personality. Born Cash Jones, Wack 100 built his reputation in the streets before transitioning into the music business. He's managed everyone from The Game to Ray J, but his relationship with Blueface might be his most profitable and most questionable business move yet. Meanwhile, Blueface was just a young dude from Los Angeles who stumbled into rap success. Born Jonathan Porter, he was gang-banging in the streets when he accidentally went viral with Thoshiana. At the time, he had zero knowledge about the music industry, contracts, or business deals. He was literally just a street dude who could rap off beat and somehow made it work. This made Blueface the perfect target for someone like Wack 100. Here you got a young, naive artist who just went viral, got no management, no lawyer, no industry knowledge whatsoever. He's making money but don't know how to protect it or structure deals properly. That's when Wack 100 swooped in like a vulture. According to Blueface himself, Wack 100's daughter heard Thoshiana and put her pops onto the song. Wack 100 then slid into Blueface's DMs trying to set up a meeting, but Blueface was hesitant at first because when you Google Wack 100, all you see is controversy and drama. Blueface even admitted he was standoffish about dealing with Wack because of his reputation. He said, "When you Google them, people tell you about him. It's nothing but crazy." On top of that, Wack 100 used to go by Crip Killer Wack back in the day, and Blueface is a Crip, so that made things even more complicated. But Wack 100 wasn't giving up. He kept blowing up Blueface's phone, trying to get him to come to his house for a meeting. Blueface kept ignoring the calls until one of his homies told him to just hear Wack out and see what he had to say. At this point, Blueface was doing everything by himself, booking shows, shooting videos, handling his own business. He was also getting interest from major labels like Atlantic and Empire, but he felt like they didn't understand his street background. When a lady at Atlantic asked if he was Cry instead of Crip, he realized these corporate people didn't get it. One day, Blueface was at the park in the hood having a good time when Wack 100 started blowing up his phone again, telling him to come to his house. Blueface didn't want to go, but Wack sent a car to pick him up. When Blueface got to Wack 100's mansion, he was immediately impressed. He said, When you see somebody who got it, it's like, okay, I like that. This was exactly what Wack 100 wanted. To show off his wealth and success to motivate Blueface and make him think Wack could get him to that level too. Here's where it gets crazy. Wack 100 had the contract already written up and ready to go when Blueface arrived. Think about that. He had legal documents prepared before they even had a proper business discussion. That's predatory behavior right there. But the most manipulative part was what happened next. Blueface looked at Wack 100's wife and asked her, "Would you insist on your son signing this right here? Like, if I was your son, would you recommend this?" And she said yes.
I look at his wife at the time like, excuse me, man, like, would you insist on your son signing this right here? Like, like if I was your son, would you recommend this? She was like, yeah, I would. And I signed at that time. That was like my confirmation.
No lawyer, no nothing.
No lawyer, no nothing.
Okay.
Based on that response from Wack's wife, Blueface signed the contract right then and there. No lawyer, no time to review the terms, no understanding of what he was getting into. He just signed because he trusted that a mother wouldn't steer him wrong. Now here's where Wack 100's finesse game gets exposed. The contract Blueface signed wasn't just a management deal, it was a record deal and a management deal combined. This means Wack 100 gets paid twice from the same revenue streams. As Blueface's record label, Wack 100 takes 50% of all music earnings right off the top. Then as his manager, he takes another 20% of Blueface's remaining earnings. Do the math, that's 70% of Blueface's money going straight to Wack 100. DJ Academics broke this down on his stream and called it exactly what it is, double dipping.
I always knew Blueface was pretty stupid. I'm gonna tell you why. Blueface is signed to Wack 100 and managed by Wack 100. Let me tell you how this works. When you sign to a label, they take at least half already. Then you're getting managed by the guy who owns the label. So of your 50% that you're getting, or less than 50%, he's still taking at least 20% of that too. It's double dipping. You get what I'm saying?
In a normal situation, you either have a record deal or a management deal, not both with the same person. That's a clear conflict of interest because your manager is supposed to negotiate the best deals for you, but how can he do that when he's also the one paying you? For context, most management deals are 15 to 20%, and most record deals split revenue 50-50 after recouping expenses. But Wack 100 structured this deal so he gets the best of both worlds while Blueface gets screwed from every angle. The worst part is that this isn't just a short-term deal. These contracts typically last for multiple albums and years, which means Wack 100 has been collecting 70% of Blueface's earnings for years and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Fast forward to today, and you can see the results of this predatory contract. Blueface recently got out of jail and came home broke. Think about that. A dude who had multiple platinum records and was one of the biggest rappers in the world just a few years ago is now struggling financially. His crab restaurant that he was promoting isn't doing well either. When you're only keeping 30% of your earnings, it's hard to build sustainable businesses or investments for the future. Most of his money has been going straight to Wack 100's pockets. Reports are saying Blueface is even having to sell his house now. This is a perfect example of how these predatory contracts can destroy an artist's financial future. While Wack 100 is living in mansions and flashing wealth on social media, the artist who actually created the music is going broke. And the crazy part is, Blueface is still locked into this deal. Even if he wanted to get out, these contracts are designed to be nearly impossible to break without paying massive penalties or going through expensive legal battles. And remember, Blueface was young and inexperienced when he signed this deal. He was maybe 21 years old, fresh out the streets with no business knowledge. Wack 100 took advantage of that inexperience and locked him into a deal that benefits Wack way more than it benefits the actual artist. This isn't just about Blueface. This is about a pattern in the music industry where older, more experienced businessmen prey on young, naive artists. They use psychological manipulation, flash wealth, and create urgency to get artists to sign deals without proper representation. Looking back, there were so many red flags that Blueface should have caught. Having a contract ready before negotiations, combining record and management deals, not allowing time for legal review, these are all classic predatory tactics. The most manipulative part was using Wack 100's wife to validate the contract. That's psychological manipulation at its finest, making the artist feel like they're getting family advice when really they're being set up to get finessed. Industry knowledge matters. This situation shows why artists need to educate themselves about the business side of music. If Blueface had understood basic contract terms or had a lawyer review the deal, he could have avoided this trap entirely. From Wack 100's perspective, he probably feels justified because he did help Blueface navigate the industry and book bigger shows. But taking 70% of someone's earnings is excessive by any standard, especially when that person is doing most of the creative work. The power dynamic is completely lopsided. Wack 100 controls Blueface's career, his money, and his business decisions. That's not a partnership. That's ownership. And when you own someone's career like that, you can basically do whatever you want with their finances. No way out. The most frustrating part for Blueface is probably that he can't easily get out of this situation. These contracts are designed to be ironclad, and breaking them usually requires paying back advances, legal fees, and sometimes even more money than the artist has. So while Blueface is struggling financially, selling his house, and dealing with legal problems, Wack 100 continues to collect his 70% cut from everything Blueface does. That's millions of dollars over the years that should have stayed in the artist's pocket. The biggest lesson here is to never ever sign a contract without having a lawyer review it first. I don't care how much you trust the person or how good the deal sounds. Get independent legal advice before you sign anything. A lot of these industry veterans position themselves as mentors and father figures to young artists, but really they're just looking for their next payday. True mentorship doesn't involve taking 70% of someone's earnings. Wack 100's mansion and lifestyle created an illusion that made Blueface think he could achieve the same success by signing with him. But what Blueface didn't realize is that Wack 100's wealth was built on taking huge percentages from multiple artists over the years. The damage from these contracts extends beyond just money. When artists can't build wealth from their own success, they can't invest in their communities, support their families properly, or create generational wealth. It keeps them dependent on the same system that's exploiting them. If Blueface had proper legal representation, they would have immediately identified the problems with this contract structure. A good entertainment lawyer would have negotiated separate deals or at least reduced the percentages significantly. Industry education. If there were better educational resources for new artists about contract terms and industry standards, Blueface would have known that 70% was way too high and that double dipping was unethical. If Blueface had consulted with other artists who had experience with management deals, they probably would have warned him about the red flags in this situation. Taking time. Simply taking a few days to think about the deal and research industry standards could have saved Blueface millions of dollars. The urgency was artificial, created by Wack 100 to prevent Blueface from making an informed decision. Blueface had interest from major labels like Atlantic and Empire. While those deals might not have been perfect either, they probably would have been more favorable than giving 70% to one person. Today, Blueface is dealing with the consequences of that contract he signed years ago. Coming home from jail broke, struggling with his business ventures and having to sell assets, all while Wack 100 continues to profit from his work. The irony is that Blueface's success made Wack 100 wealthy, but the contract structure prevented Blueface from building his own sustainable wealth. It's like working for a company where your boss gets rich while you stay broke, except you can't quit. Limited options. At this point, Blueface's options are limited. He can try to renegotiate the contract, but Wack 100 has no incentive to give up his 70% cut. He can try to break the contract, but that would probably cost more money than he has. Or he can continue working under these terms and hope to make enough volume to survive on his 30%. The psychological impact. Beyond the financial impact, this situation probably affects Blueface's motivation and creativity. When you know that most of your earnings are going to someone else, it's hard to stay motivated to work at your highest level. How this looks to other artists. Other artists in the industry are watching this situation and learning from it. It serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of proper representation and understanding contract terms before signing. The relationship between Wack 100 and Blueface isn't really a manager-artist relationship. It's more like an owner-employee relationship. Real managers work for their artists and help them maximize their earnings. They don't structure deals to maximize their own profits at the artist's expense. This is essentially an extreme version of a 360 deal where the label gets a piece of everything the artist does. But even most 360 deals don't take 70% of an artist's earnings. That's just excessive by any industry standard. If this kind of contract structure becomes normalized, it could set a dangerous precedent for how young artists get treated in the industry. Other managers might start demanding similar terms, knowing that desperate artists might accept them. These kinds of business disputes often destroy personal relationships too. Blueface probably trusted Wack 100 and saw him as a mentor figure, but now he's realizing he was being taken advantage of the whole time. When an artist can't build wealth from their success, it affects their whole family. Blueface has kids and family members who should be benefiting from his success, but instead, most of that money is going to Wack 100. The stress of financial problems, legal issues, and feeling trapped in a bad contract can seriously impact someone's mental health. Success should bring security and peace of mind, not more stress and problems. When you're only keeping 30% of your earnings, it's hard to stay motivated to work hard and create new music. Why put in maximum effort when someone else is getting most of the benefit? The music industry needs better regulations to protect young artists from predatory contracts. There should be limits on how much managers and labels can take, especially from inexperienced artists. Mandatory legal review. Maybe there should be a mandatory waiting period and legal review requirement for any contract over a certain percentage or dollar amount. This would prevent artists from making impulsive decisions that ruin their financial future. Education programs. The industry should invest in education programs that teach artists about contract terms, industry standards, and business basics before they start signing deals. Peer support networks. Experienced artists should do more to mentor newcomers and warn them about common scams and predatory practices in the industry. Transparency requirements. Maybe contracts should be required to clearly state the total percentage being taken and compare it to industry standards so artists understand exactly what they're agreeing to. At the end of the day, Blueface is the real victim here. He was a young dude who got lucky with a viral song, but instead of that success setting him up for life, it became the foundation for someone else to get rich off his work. The systemic problem. This isn't just about one bad contract. It's about a systemic problem in the music industry where experienced business people prey on young, inexperienced artists. Until that changes, we'll keep seeing situations like this. The importance of education. The biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power. If Blueface had understood basic contract terms and industry standards, he could have avoided this whole situation. Every young artist needs to educate themselves about the business side of music. Trust, but verify. You can trust people, but you should always verify what they're telling you through independent sources. Just because someone seems successful or trustworthy doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. The long-term view. When you're making business decisions, always think about the long-term consequences. A deal that seems good in the moment might end up costing you millions over the years. Hope for change. Hopefully, situations like this will lead to positive changes in the industry. Maybe future artists will be better protected, and maybe predatory managers will face more scrutiny for their practices. The legacy. Unfortunately, Blueface's legacy might end up being as much about this contract situation as it is about his music. But if his experience helps other young artists avoid similar traps, then at least some good will come from this bad situation. Final warning. To any young artists watching this, please learn from Blueface's mistake. Get a lawyer, understand your contracts, and never let anyone pressure you into signing something you don't fully understand. Your future financial security depends on the decisions you make today. The music industry can be a beautiful thing when it works properly, but it can also be a predatory environment that destroys young people's lives. Stay educated, stay protected, and always remember that if a deal sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
They were gonna buy him out of his deal for 150 and have him signed. Baby was like, and they said, oh, you can't make your mind up? All right, we'll just go to your bosses and give them double for everybody. And they bought the entire 300.
Imagine being offered $150 million for your music catalog. Life-changing money that could set your family up for generations. Now imagine your own CEO, the man who discovered you and helped build your career, going behind your back to steal that exact deal while you stayed loyal to him. That's exactly what happened to Lil Baby. And after years of silence, he's finally speaking out about how QC's CEOP finessed him out of the biggest payday of his career. We're talking about one of the most calculated betrayals in hip-hop history. Lil Baby, being the loyal soldier he is, refused to take a meeting with Scooter Braun about a $150 million buyout because he didn't want to go behind his CEO's back. But while Baby was showing that loyalty, P was having secret conversations with the same executive, ultimately selling the entire QC label for $300 million, with Baby getting absolutely nothing from the deal that was originally meant for him. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how one of hip-hop's biggest success stories turned into one of its most shocking betrayals, and why Lil Baby's reaction is sending shockwaves through the entire industry. So if you want to know the real story behind the QC empire and why this situation is making every artist question their own label relationships, you need to stick around until the very end. What's good? It's your boy, Hip Hop History, and today we're breaking down one of the most shocking stories to come out of Atlanta's music scene in years. This story involves Lil Baby, one of the most successful rappers of the past decade, Pierre P. Thomas, the CEO of Quality Control Music, and Scooter Braun, the industry heavyweight who's managed everyone from Justin Bieber to Ariana Grande. When these three worlds collided over a $150 million deal, it created one of the most controversial situations in recent hip-hop history. The story of Lil Baby and Quality Control starts in Atlanta around 2016, but not in a recording studio. It starts on the streets, where Dominique Jones, that's Lil Baby's real name, was already making a name for himself, just not in music. Baby was known in Atlanta's Zone 4 for trapping, and he was good at it. He had the street credibility, the connections, and the lifestyle that a lot of rappers only pretend to have. He wasn't trying to be a rapper. He was focused on making money through other means, and music wasn't even on his radar. But P saw something different. P recognized that Baby already had everything you need to be a successful rapper: the authentic street background, the natural charisma, the look, and most importantly, the respect from the streets. All he was missing was the music. This is where P's genius as a businessman really shows. He wasn't looking for someone who was already trying to rap. He was looking for someone who already had the authenticity and credibility that you can't manufacture, and then convincing them to channel that into music. The conversation that changed everything reportedly happened when P approached Baby about making a transition from the streets to the studio. P's pitch was simple. You're already living the life that rappers talk about. You already have the respect and the stories. So why not turn that into legal money through music? For Baby, this wasn't just about switching careers. It was about finding a way to maintain his lifestyle and support his family without the constant legal risks that come with street life. P was offering him a path to legitimacy that could potentially be even more lucrative than what he was already doing. P didn't just sign Baby and hope for the best. He invested time, money, and resources into developing him as an artist. He connected him with the right producers, got him in the studio with experienced engineers, and provided the industry knowledge that Baby needed to navigate the music business. The early days of their relationship were genuinely collaborative. P was teaching Baby about the music industry, helping him develop his sound, and providing the platform he needed to reach audiences beyond Atlanta. Baby was bringing the authenticity and work ethic that would become the foundation of his success. Once Lil Baby committed to music, his rise was nothing short of extraordinary. We're talking about an artist who went from never recording a song to becoming one of the biggest names in hip-hop in less than 2 years. His first mixtape, Perfect Timing, dropped in April 2017, and it immediately showed that P's instincts were right. Baby had a natural ability to translate his street experiences into compelling music. His flow was effortless. His storytelling was authentic, and his work ethic was incredible. By 2018, with the release of Harder Than Ever, Baby had achieved something that most artists spend years trying to accomplish. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, and songs like Southside were getting massive radio play and streaming numbers. But here's where the story gets really interesting from a business perspective. As Baby's success grew, so did his earning potential. We're talking about an artist who went from making no money from music to commanding six-figure performance fees in less than 18 months. The touring revenue alone was staggering. Baby went from performing at small venues for a few $1,000s to headlining major venues for $200,000 per show. By 2019, his performance fees had reached $500,000 per show. By 2020, he was commanding over $1 million per performance for major festivals and special events. The streaming revenue was equally impressive. Songs like Drip Too Hard with Gunna accumulated hundreds of millions of streams. His collaboration with Drake on Yes Indeed became one of the biggest songs of 2018. Every project he released was performing better than the last. From P's perspective, this success validated everything he had believed about Baby's potential. He had taken someone with no music industry experience and helped turn them into one of the most successful artists in hip-hop. For Baby, the success was life-changing. He was able to provide for his family, move them out of dangerous situations, and build generational wealth through his music. The transition from the streets to legitimate success was everything P had promised it could be. But success also brought new challenges. As Baby's profile grew, so did the interest from other industry players. And most importantly, his music catalog was becoming incredibly valuable. Before we get to the Scooter Braun situation, we need to talk about QC's reputation in the industry because it's crucial to understanding why what happened to Baby wasn't completely surprising to industry insiders. Quality Control Music had built an impressive roster and achieved massive commercial success. But they also had a reputation for being extremely aggressive in their business practices, particularly when it came to contract terms and artist compensation. The most public example came with the Migos lawsuit. In 2019, the group filed a lawsuit against QC, alleging that their contracts were structured in ways that heavily favored the label while limiting the artist's ability to earn fair compensation from their success. According to the lawsuit documents, the Migos claimed that their contracts included automatic renewal clauses that essentially trapped them with QC indefinitely. As long as QC had a distribution deal, the Migos' contracts would automatically renew, making it nearly impossible for them to leave. The most damaging allegation was about the financial structure. The Migos claimed that despite generating hundreds of millions in revenue through their music, they were seeing only a small fraction of that money due to how their deals were structured. The lawsuit also alleged that the same lawyer who negotiated the Migos' contracts also worked for QC, creating a conflict of interest where the person supposed to be protecting the artist's interests was actually working for the label. Industry insiders weren't surprised by these allegations. QC had a reputation for being shrewd negotiators who structured deals to maximize their own profits, sometimes at the expense of their artists' long-term financial interests. Other artists who had been signed to QC also had similar stories. Offset had to pay millions to get his solo rights back from the label. Young Thug, in leaked phone calls, talked about how QC artists weren't making the money they should have been making given their commercial success. This reputation was well known in industry circles. When major deals were being discussed involving QC artists, everyone understood that P and his team were going to prioritize QC's interests above everything else. In 2021, Scooter Braun, one of the most powerful managers and executives in the music industry, identified Lil Baby's catalog as one of the most valuable assets in hip-hop. The offer he made was staggering: $150 million for Lil Baby's music catalog. But here's where Baby's character and loyalty came into play. When Scooter's team reached out about setting up a meeting to discuss the deal, Baby's response was telling. According to multiple sources, including leaked phone conversations, Baby told Scooter's representatives that he couldn't take a meeting without involving P and QC. Baby's exact words were something along the lines of not wanting to feel like he was going behind his CEO's back. He said P was his real homie and that he didn't want to do anything that would seem disloyal or underhanded. This response shows everything you need to know about Baby's character at that time. He had an opportunity to secure $150 million for himself, but he was more concerned about maintaining loyalty to the person who had helped launch his career. From Baby's perspective, this made perfect sense. P had taken a chance on him when he wasn't even a rapper. P had invested time, money, and resources into building his career. So when presented with this massive financial opportunity, Baby's instinct was to make sure P was involved and that everyone benefited from the deal. Scooter's team reportedly told Baby that he didn't need to bring P to the meeting, that this was about Baby's individual catalog. But Baby insisted that he wouldn't move forward without P being involved. This is where the story takes a dark turn, because while Baby was being loyal and refusing to take meetings without P was having his own conversations with Scooter Braun's team. According to the leaked phone calls that later surfaced, P was well aware of Scooter's interest in Baby's catalog, but instead of working with Baby to structure a deal that would benefit both of them, P saw an opportunity to maximize his own profits. While Lil Baby was refusing to take meetings with Scooter Braun out of loyalty to P and QC, P was conducting his own negotiations behind Baby's back. The leaked phone calls reveal the full scope of what actually happened. According to P's own words in the recorded conversations, after Baby refused to meet with Scooter without P being present, Scooter's team went directly to P with a different proposition. Instead of buying just Baby's catalog for $150 million, they offered to buy the entire Quality Control label for $300 million. Here's the crucial detail. Scooter didn't actually want the entire QC catalog. According to P's own admission in the phone calls, Scooter's primary interest was in Baby's music. The $300 million offer for the entire label was essentially Scooter paying double to get what he really wanted, Baby's catalog, while P got to keep the extra money that should have gone to Baby. P's exact words in the leaked call were something like, "Scooter tried to buy Baby for $150 million, but Baby wouldn't take the meeting without me. So Scooter went around Baby and bought the whole label from me for $300 million. Think about the mathematics of this betrayal. Baby was offered $150 million for his catalog. P sold the entire label, with Baby's catalog being the primary asset, for $300 million. Baby received nothing from this deal, while P pocketed the entire $300 million. In the phone calls, P is actually bragging about how he outmaneuvered Baby. He's explaining how Baby's loyalty was essentially used against him. While Baby was trying to do the right thing by including P in the deal, P was using that loyalty as an opportunity to cut Baby out entirely. The most damaging part of P's recorded comments is when he talks about how Baby deserved to get something from the deal, but then explains why he didn't give him anything. P acknowledges that Baby was the main reason for the deal's value, but he structured it so all the money went to QC's ownership. This wasn't just a business decision, this was a personal betrayal of someone who had shown nothing but loyalty. Baby had turned down $150 million because he didn't want to go behind P's back, and P responded by going behind Baby's back to take a deal worth twice as much. When the leaked phone calls became public and the full scope of P's betrayal was revealed, Lil Baby's reaction was swift and decisive. The first sign that something had changed came through social media, where Baby and QC unfollowed each other on Instagram. In the hip-hop industry, social media moves like this aren't just personal, they're public declarations. When major artists unfollow their labels or business partners, it's usually a sign that serious problems are happening behind the scenes. Baby's reaction went beyond just social media gestures. According to industry sources, Baby's team immediately began exploring legal options to address what had happened. The challenge was that P had technically operated within the bounds of his contracts and ownership structure, even though what he did was ethically questionable. Baby's position was understandable from multiple angles. First, he had been offered $150 million for his catalog and had turned it down out of loyalty to P. Second, P had used that loyalty against him to structure a deal that benefited QC while giving Baby nothing. Third, Baby's music was the primary reason the deal was valuable in the first place. From a financial perspective, Baby had lost out on generational wealth because he tried to do the right thing. The $150 million he was offered would have been life-changing money that could have secured his family's future for generations. But the betrayal went beyond just money. This was about trust, loyalty, and the fundamental nature of their business relationship. Baby had viewed P as more than just a CEO. He had seen him as a mentor, a friend, and someone who genuinely cared about his success. The leaked phone calls revealed that P viewed their relationship very differently. While Baby saw loyalty and partnership, P saw business opportunities and profit maximization. The unfollowing on social media sent a clear message to the industry. The relationship between Baby and QC was over, and everyone needed to understand that Baby felt betrayed by what had happened. The Lil Baby and QC situation sent shockwaves through the hip-hop industry that extended far beyond just one artist and one label. The leaked phone calls and the details of P's betrayal became a case study in how the music business operates when big money is involved. For other artists, Baby's situation served as a cautionary tale about loyalty and business relationships. Here was someone who had done everything right. He had been loyal, he had generated massive success for his label, and he had tried to handle business situations with integrity. Yet he still got betrayed when the numbers got large enough. The situation also highlighted the importance of ownership and contract structures in the music industry. Baby's catalog was worth $150 million. But because of how his deal with QC was structured, he had no control over what happened when outside parties wanted to buy it. Industry lawyers and business managers began using Baby's situation as an example when advising their clients about contract negotiations. The case showed how artists could create enormous value but still be vulnerable to exploitation if they didn't have proper ownership structures and legal protections. But perhaps most importantly, the situation changed how artists thought about loyalty in business relationships. Baby's loyalty to P had cost him $150 million, and that lesson wasn't lost on other artists who were dealing with their own label relationships. The hip-hop community's reaction was largely supportive of Baby. Fans and other artists recognized that he had been betrayed by someone he trusted, and there was widespread criticism of P's actions. When you look at the whole picture of what happened between Lil Baby and QC's CEO P, it's one of the most shocking betrayals in hip-hop history. Baby's loyalty cost him $150 million, while P's betrayal netted him $300 million. The leaked phone calls revealed not just what happened, but P's attitude about it, showing an industry executive who saw artist loyalty as something to be exploited rather than respected. This story matters because it exposes how the music business really operates when big money is involved. It shows how artists can create enormous value but still be vulnerable to exploitation if they don't have proper protections. And it demonstrates why loyalty in business relationships needs to be backed up by legal safeguards and ownership structures. Baby's reaction, unfollowing QC and distancing himself from P, was measured but clear. He understood that the relationship was over and that he needed to protect himself going forward. For the hip-hop industry, this situation serves as a cautionary tale about trust, loyalty, and the importance of fair business practices. The $150 million that Baby lost represents more than just money. It represents the cost of misplaced trust and the importance of protecting yourself in an industry that doesn't always reward loyalty. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're going to keep covering the stories that reveal how the music industry really operates. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this situation. Was Baby right to be loyal, or should he have taken that meeting with Scooter? Until next time, this is your boy Rap Thread. And remember, in the music business, loyalty is a luxury that not everyone can afford. Peace.
Gucci Mane, he's doing a Birdman hand rub right now because he just authorized a new Pooh Shiesty album to be released while Pooh Shiesty himself can't get a release from the feds.
Pooh Shiesty's mom just went off on Gucci Mane for dropping his album. And what started as a public outburst from a mother defending her son has cracked open something much bigger than anyone expected. There is a federal criminal case, an alleged confrontation involving a firearm and nearly $500,000, a contract dispute that reportedly pushed things past the breaking point, and now a brand new album sitting in the middle of all of it, while Pooh Shiesty sits in federal custody unable to say a single word about any of it. The label that helped build his career is the same label at the center of the conflict, and the same relationship that once looked like opportunity is now the subject of federal charges, family accusations, and serious questions about who actually benefits when an artist's music keeps moving while the artist himself cannot. Stay locked in because this story goes way deeper than an album drop.
That's why they be talking about me, lying and deceit, going against me. I'm too 100 on a whole nother level though. Now switch, I'll be 0.
Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story behind Pooh Shiesty, Gucci Mane, 1017 Records, and why the release of All Eyes on Shiest has Pooh Shiesty's mother publicly calling out the label boss who once helped make her son famous. We are also getting into Gucci Mane's mother and the role she plays in this story, because this thing has pulled in more than just the two artists at the center of it. Let's get into it. Now, to understand why Gladys Baines is this fired up, you need to know exactly who her son is and how he ended up in business with Gucci Mane in the first place. Pooh Shiesty came up out of Memphis, Tennessee, and if you know anything about that city's rap culture, you already know Memphis produces artists with a very specific, unmistakable energy. Dark, raw, unfiltered, and rooted in a street reality that comes through in every bar. Pooh Shiesty had all of that, and when Gucci Mane's 1017 Records brought him into the fold, it gave that Memphis energy a national platform. The signing looked like the right move for everybody involved. Gucci Mane was getting a genuine talent with real street credibility, and Pooh Shiesty was getting the infrastructure, the resources, and the industry reach that independent artists spend years trying to build on their own. And for a while it worked. Tracks like Twerksome put Pooh Shiesty on the map in a real way. He became one of the most recognizable faces attached to the 1017 brand. His music was moving, his name was growing, and Gucci Mane had another winning artist generating heat for the label. From the outside looking in, this was exactly what a record deal is supposed to look like. A young artist with undeniable talent plugged into a structure with enough power to amplify that talent across the country. But according to Gladys Baines, what was happening behind closed doors told a very different story. Here is what Pooh Shiesty's mother wants people to understand. She believes that while her son was out here building his name, putting in the work, and generating real money for 1017 Records, the deal he was locked into was not giving him back what he deserved. She has been vocal about the belief that Pooh Shiesty's music was making the label significant money, while he was left feeling like he had no control, no real ownership, and no way out of a contract that was working against him. And she is not speaking in vague terms. Gladys Baines has made it clear that in her eyes, her son was trapped, and that the frustration that built up inside that situation is what led to everything that followed. These are her claims, and the full financial details of the contract have not been made public, but the picture she is painting is of a young artist who felt like he was being used and could not find a legitimate way to break free. So according to federal prosecutors, Pooh Shiesty decided to handle it himself. In January 2000, he and several other individuals arranged a meeting with Gucci Mane at a recording studio in Dallas. On the surface, it looked like a contract discussion, the kind of sit down that happens in the music business all the time. But prosecutors alleged that what actually went down in that studio was nothing close to a normal business conversation. According to the federal indictment, Pooh Shiesty pulled out an AK-style firearm and used it to force Gucci Mane to sign paperwork releasing him from his 1017 contract. And it did not stop there. Prosecutors further alleged that Gucci Mane was robbed during the confrontation, losing approximately $450,000 in cash and jewelry, including his wedding ring. That is the government's version of events, and Pooh Shiesty has not been convicted of anything. He is entitled to the presumption of innocence, and these allegations have yet to be proven in a court of law. But what happened next is where Gladys Baines says things went from bad to worse for her son. Gucci Mane went to the cops, and from the moment that became known publicly, Pooh Shiesty's mother has had something to say about it. In the world her son came from, going to law enforcement over a dispute carries enormous weight, and Gladys Baines has not been quiet about how she feels about the fact that Gucci Mane contacted authorities after the alleged confrontation. She sees it as a betrayal. She sees it as a man who built his entire career inside a culture that has a deeply adversarial relationship with law enforcement, turning around and using that same system against her son the moment things got uncomfortable for him. Real talk, that perspective has resonated with a lot of people who have been following this story, because the optics of Gucci Mane running to the feds on a young artist from his own label hit different when you understand the culture these men both came from. Now, the federal government does not always need a victim actively cooperating to build a case. Phone records, surveillance footage, digital evidence, witness testimony from co-defendants, all of that can keep a prosecution moving even if the alleged victim steps back. But what is not in dispute is that Pooh Shiesty is now sitting in federal custody. Bail has been denied, and the charges he is facing are serious. Kidnapping, robbery, and firearm allegations in federal court come with significant sentencing exposure, and federal prosecutors have a high conviction rate. His legal team will challenge everything when this goes to trial. But the reality right now is that Gladys Baines is watching her son locked up, while the man she believes helped put him there is still out here running his label and collecting money from her son's music. And that brings us to the part that sent her completely over the edge. While Pooh Shiesty sits in federal custody, unable to move, unable to promote, unable to do a single interview or control a single thing about his public image, Gucci Mane and the 1017 label structure moved forward and dropped a brand new Pooh Shiesty album. All Eyes on Shia's 16 tracks released August 7th, 2026 through the label connected to Gucci Mane and distributed through Atlantic Records. And Gladys Baines went off because from where she is standing, this is the clearest possible proof of everything she has been saying about how her son has been treated. Her son allegedly tried to get out of this contract. Her son is now in jail, and the man who she believes called the cops on him is now sitting back and releasing her son's music to make money off it, while Pooh Shiesty cannot do a single thing about it. That is the accusation she is putting out publicly, and it has hit hard because the timing makes it impossible to ignore. Think about what is actually happening here. On one side, you have a federal criminal case where the central allegation is that Pooh Shiesty wanted out of his 1017 deal so badly that he allegedly put a gun on the label boss to force a release. On the other side, you have that same label boss dropping a 16-track commercial album under that same deal while the artist is in a federal facility. Gladys Baines is not letting that contradiction go unaddressed. She wants the public to see it for exactly what she believes it is, which is Gucci Mane capitalizing on her son's situation and profiting from music Pooh Shiesty can no longer protect or control. To understand why the money side of this hits so hard, you need to know how label deals actually work, because the numbers people see publicly never tell the full story. When an artist signs to a label, they get an advance up front, but that advance is not free money. It gets recouped out of the artist's future earnings before they see a single dollar in royalties. On top of that, the label controls distribution revenue, often participates in publishing, and takes a percentage of recorded music income. By the time production costs, recoupment, and the label's cut are factored in, what the artist actually takes home can be a fraction of what the project generates on the surface. Gladys Baines knows this, and her public argument is essentially that the same structural setup that she believes kept her son underpaid while he was free is now continuing to work against him while he is locked up. Except now he has zero ability to push back or demand accountability. Every stream All Eyes on Shia's generates, every dollar that moves through that project is flowing through a contractual structure that Pooh Shiesty allegedly tried to escape and is now completely powerless to renegotiate. The lead single, Last Man Breathing, has already started generating attention, and the timing could not be more loaded. This is not just a music release. It is a music release that is landing in the middle of a federal criminal case involving the artist and the label boss. And Pooh Shiesty's mother is making sure nobody just scrolls past it and treats it like a normal drop. She is the one out here keeping the heat on this story, because her son cannot. Lawyers work within legal strategy and cannot always speak freely in public. Industry people protect their positions. Label executives do not volunteer transparency about where the money goes. That leaves Gladys Baines as the loudest voice willing to say out loud what she believes is really happening, and she has been saying it without pulling punches. Now, Gucci Mane's mother has also been pulled into the public conversation surrounding this situation, which tells you how far outside the normal music industry drama this thing has stretched. When mothers on both sides of a conflict start becoming part of the story, it is no longer just about business. It becomes personal in a way that neither legal proceedings nor label politics can fully contain. And that personal dimension is exactly what Gladys Baines has been leaning into, because she understands that the public connects with a mother fighting for her child in a way they do not always connect with legal arguments or industry analysis. She is not presenting a court brief. She is presenting herself as a woman who watched her son build something real, get trapped in a deal that she believes worked against him, take drastic action out of desperation according to her reading of the situation, get arrested, and then watch the same label structure continue profiting from his name while he sits behind bars. What makes Gucci Mane's position in all of this so complicated is that he was genuinely instrumental in Pooh Shiesty's rise. The 1017 connection was real, the platform was real, and the early success Pooh Shiesty found was built in part on the infrastructure Gucci Mane provided. But Gladys Baines is arguing that the same relationship that helped create her son's career became the thing that started working against him.
and that when Pooh Shiesty tried to find a way out, Gucci Mane used the legal system to shut that down and is now using the music catalog to keep cashing in. That is the exposure she is pushing, not a balanced account of a complicated business dispute. An accusation that the man who signed her son turned on him, put him in federal custody, and is now making money off his back while he cannot defend himself. The social media response to all of this has been intense and divided, but the division itself reveals something important. There are people who look at Gladys Baines and see exactly what she is presenting herself as, a mother who is the only one willing to tell her son's side of the story when he cannot tell it himself. They see the album release as Exhibit A in her case, proof that the label's interest in Pooh Shiesty was always financial, and that Gucci Mane has no problem continuing to profit from that even after everything that has allegedly happened between them. And then there are people who acknowledge the contract frustration angle, but draw a hard line at the alleged confrontation itself, arguing that whatever was wrong with the deal, allegedly putting a firearm on someone and taking nearly $500,000 in cash and jewelry, crosses a line that no contract grievance can justify. Both camps are loud, both camps have been growing, and the release of All Eyes on Shiest poured fuel on both fires simultaneously. What Gladys Baines has done by going public is made sure that nobody gets to treat this album like a normal release. Every conversation about All Eyes on Shiest now has to happen in the context of everything she has put out there. The contract, the alleged confrontation, Gucci Mane going to the authorities, her son sitting in a federal facility, the money flowing through a deal her son allegedly wanted out of badly enough to put his entire freedom on the line. She has made the album inseparable from the story surrounding it, and that is exactly what she set out to do. The biggest thing Gladys Baines wants people to sit with is the irony at the core of this entire situation. Her son allegedly went to extreme lengths to break free from Gucci Mane and 1017 Records. He allegedly put everything on the line trying to get out. And the outcome of that is that he is now more trapped than he has ever been, sitting in federal custody while the label releases his music, collects the revenue, and moves forward without him. If her version of events is even partially accurate, then everything Pooh Shiesty allegedly did to gain control over his career has resulted in him losing every last piece of it. And Gucci Mane, according to Gladys Baines, is the one who made sure it ended up that way. Now let's talk about what Gucci Mane's public position has looked like through all of this, because it is a significant part of why Gladys Baines feels like the narrative has been allowed to run without any real accountability. Gucci Mane has not been out here doing press runs addressing the allegations, breaking down the contract situation, or publicly defending the decision to release All Eyes on Shiest while Pooh Shiesty is in federal custody. And that silence, for Gladys Baines, is its own kind of answer. Because when a mother is publicly accusing you of running to the feds on her son and then cashing in on his music while he sits locked up, the absence of a direct response leaves the public to fill in the blanks themselves. Right now, those blanks are being filled entirely by everything Gladys Baines is putting out there, and she's been making the most of that window. There is also a generational dimension to this story that does not get discussed enough. Gucci Mane survived legal situations of his own, spent time incarcerated himself, came back and rebuilt his career, and eventually positioned himself on the business side as a label boss. But Gladys Baines is essentially arguing that the lessons Gucci Mane should have taken from his own experiences about how the system can be used against artists, about how money and control define everything in this business, were not applied to how he managed his relationship with her son. Instead, she is saying, he used his position to keep Pooh Shiesty locked in and then used the system against him when Pooh Shiesty tried to break free. That framing has landed with a lot of people because it takes everything Gucci Mane has publicly represented and turns it against him in a very pointed way. And then there is the question of what this does to Pooh Shiesty's reputation and legacy in real time. Because while the legal case moves through the federal system at its own pace, the cultural conversation about who Pooh Shiesty is and what this situation means for his place in hip-hop is happening right now, every single day, and he has no voice in it. The album All Eyes on Shiest is out in the world carrying his name, his sound, his artistry, and the story attached to it is one of the most complicated and explosive in recent rap history. Every new listener who finds that project is going to find it inside a cloud of federal charges, contract allegations, a mother's public accusations, and a label dispute that allegedly ended with a gun in a Dallas recording studio. That is not a neutral introduction to an artist's music. And Pooh Shiesty cannot do a single thing to shape how people receive it, contextualize it, or separate the art from the chaos surrounding it. Gladys Bain sees that clearly, and it is part of why her frustration with the album release goes beyond just the money. It is about her son's name being out in the world, attached to a story he cannot tell himself. The 1017 brand itself is worth examining more closely here, because it is central to understanding why Gladys Bain feels the way she does about the album drop. Gucci Mane did not just sign Pooh Shiesty and hand him a microphone. He made Pooh Shiesty part of a specific brand identity, a specific aesthetic, a specific lane in hip-hop that carried the 1017 name with it. Every time Pooh Shiesty moved units, gained streams, or expanded his audience, that growth had the 1017 stamp on it. The label benefited from his momentum in ways that went beyond just the direct revenue from his projects. His success raised the profile of the entire brand. And according to Gladys Bain, while that brand was being built partly on her son's back, the contractual structure was not reflecting that contribution in a way that Pooh Shiesty felt was fair. So when All Eyes on Shiest drops and the 1017 infrastructure is right there behind it, it is not just an album to her, it is the continuation of a system that she believes has been extracting value from her son since the beginning. Let's also get into what federal custody actually means for an artist in practical terms. Because it is easy to say someone is locked up and move past it without really sitting with what that means for every dimension of their life. When Pooh Shiesty is in that federal facility, he is not just unable to perform or make appearances. He has severely limited communication with the outside world. His ability to consult with his team about business decisions is restricted. His ability to review what is being done with his music, approve or reject creative decisions, negotiate anything about how his catalog is being managed. All of that is either gone or reduced to whatever can be communicated through the narrow channels available to someone in federal custody. Gladys Bain is watching all of that happen in real time. She is watching a system that was built around her son's talent continue running without him having any meaningful input. And she is the one outside those walls who has the platform and the willingness to say something about it publicly. That context makes her anger make even more sense when you sit with it. The lead single Last Man Breathing carries a particular weight given everything surrounding this situation, and people who have been paying attention to the language in the title alone have pointed out that it hits differently when you know what is happening in the background. Whether that title was chosen deliberately to connect to the controversy or simply reflects where Pooh Shiesty's head was when he recorded it, the fact is that it landed in the middle of one of the most explosive label disputes in recent hip-hop history and immediately became part of the conversation. That kind of cultural moment does not happen by accident, and it does not happen in a vacuum. And Gladys Bain has made sure that nobody is consuming any part of this album rollout without knowing exactly what she believes is behind it. What this situation has also done is reignite a much larger conversation about artist rights and label contracts that the music industry has been having for decades, but that tends to get more attention when it surfaces in a story this dramatic. Artists from every era have talked about feeling trapped by deals they signed when they were young and hungry and did not fully understand the long-term implications of what they were agreeing to. The structures have not changed as much as they should have, and the power imbalance between a major label with legal resources and an artist trying to build their career independently still defines the reality for most people who sign those contracts. Gladys Bain is not making an abstract argument about industry reform. She is making a very personal and specific argument about what happened to her son inside one of those structures. And the specificity of it is what makes it cut through. This is not a think piece. This is a mother naming names and pointing fingers. And the culture has been listening. A federal trial will eventually determine what actually happened in that Dallas studio in January 2026. The legal process will test the government's evidence, challenge the allegations, and reach a verdict. But the conversation that Gladys Bain has opened up is not going to close when the trial starts, because what she has put into the public record is bigger than one criminal case. She has raised questions about power, about who controls an artist's work, about what happens when a label relationship that was supposed to be an opportunity becomes something an artist feels desperate enough to escape by any means necessary. The album is out, her son is locked up, Gucci Mane is collecting, and according to Pooh Shiesty's mother, the world is only now starting to understand what has really been going on inside that 1017 relationship all along. The story is not over. The trial is coming. The music is in the streets. And Gladys Baines is not done talking. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think Gucci Mane was wrong for releasing Pooh Shiesty's album while he is sitting in federal custody? Is Gladys Baines exposing something real about how the label has been handling her son? Or is this just a mother going to bat for her child no matter what? And what do you think happens when this case actually goes to trial? Let us know where you stand. Hit that like button if this video gave you the full picture. Subscribe so you never miss a breakdown like this. 1. And check the video on screen for more stories just like this.
One thing I don't do, I'm the type of person, I'm a team player. So if God was in a situation and I feel like somebody feels trying to take his life, you damn right I'm gonna ride.
Imagine going from flexing millions, riding private jets, cracking all the huzz you dreamed of, and repping one of the most powerful labels in hip-hop to going completely ghost. No music, no deals, no buzz, nothing. We're talking about Blac Youngsta, and here's the part that's gonna blow your mind. He got dropped from CMG, Yo Gotti's label, and now, word is he's out here practically begging Gotti to let him back in. And on top of that, the money is running out, the streams are dry, the features are gone, and the streets are saying Youngsta might actually be going broke. Oh my God, that is crazy. But wait, before we get into all of that, I need to break down the full story. Because y'all, this ain't just some random rapper falling off. This is a whole rise, a whole fall, a whole betrayal, a whole ghost story, and it's wild from start to finish. So sit down, lock in, and do not click away because I promise you, the ending of this story is something nobody saw coming. Let's get into it. His real name is Sammy Marquez Benson, born April 8, 1990 in Memphis, Tennessee. And not just Memphis, gang. We're talking McMillan Street on the south side, one of the roughest pockets in a city that's already known for being rough. No cap, this dude grew up with literally nothing. Him and his younger brothers were raised by their grandparents because his parents weren't in the picture. And even the grandparents, both of them working, could barely keep food on the table. Bro, think about that for a second. Both grandparents have jobs and they're still struggling. That's the environment Youngsta came up in. That's what shaped him. His grandfather even got him a job at a local grocery store when he was 7 years old. And he got fired because the manager caught him placing fake orders so he could take food home. 7 years old, bro. That's not crime. That's survival. Y'all seeing this? The come up was real. So naturally, growing up in that kind of poverty, the streets were right there. Memphis streets don't play. And Youngsta didn't play either. He was living that life before music was ever even a thought. But at some point, he found rap. And rap, for a lot of dudes from that environment, becomes the only way out. He started putting out music seriously around 2012, released his debut mixtape called Fast Bricks, then kept grinding. Fast Bricks 2, Fast Bricks 3, tape after tape, just building a name in Memphis. No label, no cosign, no budget, just a dude from the south side who was hungry and had nothing to lose. And here's where it gets crazy, because most rappers grind for years and nobody notices. But Youngsta, he made something that caught everybody's attention. And I mean everybody. So get this, it's 2015, Blac Youngsta drops a record called Heavy. And bro, if you haven't heard it, go listen right now. That record was hard. Memphis energy, real street vibes, and it started spreading fast. People were playing it everywhere. But here's the part that nobody was expecting. Yo Gotti, the guy, the Memphis king, the label boss, the Yo Gotti, he hears Heavy and loses his mind over it. Now Gotti at this point had been in the game for decades. He'd already built Collective Music Group, formerly known as Cocaine Music Group. He'd studied Cash Money, studied Rock Nation, studied every great label that ever existed. He was looking for the right talent, and when he heard Heavy, he knew he'd found something. But here's how the actual connection happened. And this is the part that's genuinely insane, no cap. Youngsta showed up to one of Yo Gotti's video shoots, uninvited, just pulled up, and he was blasting his own music, just straight up blasting it in the parking lot at a Yo Gotti shoot. That is bold, that is unhinged, that is Memphis. And Gotti noticed. He said it himself. Within however long it took to film that video, they were already pulling off talking about Youngsta, meaning he made such an impression that Gotti was discussing him with his people before the shoot was even wrapped. Bro, that is crazy. He literally crashed the shoot and walked away with a label deal. That's not a rap story, that's a movie. So Gotti hopped on the Heavy remix. That was the stamp. That was Gotti saying to the whole world, this is my guy. And shortly after that, it became official. In 2015, Black Youngsta signed to Collective Music Group, and the signing? Oh, it didn't happen in some boring boardroom. Gotti signed him on a private jet. He literally posted about it. "Welcome to CMG. This your shot, homie. You get back what you put in." On a private jet. Gang, if you come from nothing and you're signing a deal on a private jet, that feeling has to be indescribable. That's the American dream for a kid from McMillan Street who used to steal food at 7 years old. So now Youngsta is CMG, and things start moving fast. His first mixtape under the label, I Swear to God, dropped September 2015. Gotti was on it. Boozy Badazz was on it. It was a statement. Then he started establishing his own imprint under CMG called Heavy Camp. That's important because Heavy Camp was his brand inside the CMG umbrella, his own lane, his own identity. The releases kept coming, tape after tape. He was building momentum the right way, staying active, staying in the streets, staying relevant. And then 2017 happened. Hip Hopper, that record blew up. Then 2018, Booty. And y'all, Booty is the one that really put him in front of the mainstream. That record peaked at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100. It got a gold certification. For a dude from the south side of Memphis who was raised by his grandparents and got fired from a grocery store at 7, that's a whole other level. His debut studio album, 223, peaked at number 42 on the Billboard 200. That is a real number. That's not a fluke. That means people were actually buying and streaming this man's music in serious numbers. He followed it up with Church on Sunday in 2019. CMG was growing. Moneybagg Yo was shooting up the charts. 42 Doug was coming. ESTG was coming. It felt like a dynasty was being built, and Youngsta was right there in the middle of it. He was doing collabs with Tory Lanez, T.I., DaBaby, G-Eazy, Wiz Khalifa, Ty Dolla $ign. He did a whole joint project with Moneybagg Yo. He was everywhere. Y'all seeing this? From crashing a video shoot in Memphis with his own music blasting, to Billboard charts, gold records, collabing with some of the biggest names in rap, that is an insane run. But here's where it starts to get complicated, because around the same time Youngsta was on his rise, there was a shadow over Memphis, a beef, a real one, and it was about to change everything. Okay, chat, this is where it gets heavy, and I need y'all to lock in because this part of the story is serious. Yo Gotti had a long-running beef with Young Dolph, another Memphis rapper who built his whole career independently and was beloved on the streets. Dolph and Gotti went back and forth for years, and in the middle of that beef, Black Youngsta was Gotti's soldier. In 2016, Youngsta filmed a video of himself pulling up to Dolph's South Memphis neighborhood heavily armed. He dropped diss tracks. He was the one on the front lines of the beef while Gotti mostly stayed on the sidelines. That's important. Remember that. Now jump to November 2021. The unthinkable happens. Young Dolph gets shot and killed at a cookie shop in Memphis. The whole city is mourning.
The rapper Young Dolph is gunned down and killed at a South Memphis cookie shop.
There will be extra police presence in many parts of the city.
The whole rap world is in shock. Dolph was loved. He was independent. He had built something real. He had a family. And just like that, he was gone. And what does Black Youngsta do almost immediately after? He performs Shake Some, his diss track against Dolph, at a concert in Dallas, with people in the crowd, while the whole city is still grieving. Oh my God, bro. The backlash was immediate, and it was severe. And if that wasn't enough, he drops a new music video where he's walking through a cemetery and stops at a gravestone with the name Thornton on it. Dolph's last name was Thornton. Gang, people lost it. Dolph's fans, Dolph's family, the Memphis community, they were furious. And suddenly all eyes were on Gotti. Is he gonna check Youngsta? Is he gonna cut him loose? Reports started flying everywhere. Blogs, social media, saying that Youngsta had been dropped from CMG. And for a minute, those rumors were running so hot that it felt like fact. But then Gotti got on Twitter and said, "I'm seeing too much cap on these blogs. Fake news, Lil Bro a boss, he can't be dropped." And then he told everyone to keep his name out of the rumors. So on paper, Youngsta was still CMG. Gotti defended him publicly. But here's the thing, and this is where you gotta read between the lines. Gotti's defense was real short, real surface level. He didn't say Youngsta did the right thing. He didn't say I stand behind him 100%. He just said he can't be dropped. There's a difference. And from that point forward, things were never quite the same. Now here's where it gets real, and this is where I need y'all to pay close attention. Because what happened to Black Youngsta after the Dolph situation isn't a single moment. It's a slow burn. It's a fade. And the music industry fade is one of the coldest things that can happen to an artist. because nobody ever officially tells you it's over. They just stop. Look at CMG after 2021. Gotti's label was ascending to new heights. They locked in an 8-figure partnership deal with Interscope Records. 8 figures, gang. That's massive. Moneybagg Yo dropped A Gangsta's Pain and it hit #1 on the Billboard 200 twice. 42, Doug was moving, ESTG was moving. And then in 2022, CMG signed Glorilla, and she became a phenomenon almost overnight. Grammy nominations, BET Awards, top 10 pop hits. Where was Youngsta in all of this? On the CMG compilation album in 2022, he had a feature. That's it. While Moneybagg Yo was running the charts and Glorilla was the hottest new thing in rap, the dude who was literally the second artist ever signed to CMG after Yo Gotti built this whole machine was getting a feature credit. Bro, that is cold. That is the industry telling you something without saying a single word. The streams were dying down. The features from big names dried up. The label wasn't pushing his projects the way they were pushing everybody else, and people started noticing. Why isn't CMG giving Youngsta the same resources? Why isn't he getting the same promo budget? Why is the second artist ever signed to this label being treated like the last priority? And here's the tea. Some people think the Dolph situation poisoned the well in ways nobody could ever fully fix. Because even though Gotti defended Youngsta publicly, the whole situation brought a cloud over CMG that Gotti didn't need. And having your artist performing diss tracks and making cemetery videos days after a man got murdered, that's PR damage that doesn't just disappear. So the label kept him technically on the roster, but the support was drying up like a puddle in the Memphis summer heat. So word started circulating that Youngsta had announced his departure from CMG. Not just rumors this time, publicly. He was done. He was going independent. The narrative was that he was fed up with being the last artist on the label to get support, tired of watching everybody else eat while he was sitting at the table with an empty plate. And on one hand, you can understand it. If you built your name, helped put a label on the map, rode for that label through everything, and then you watch new signees get more attention and more resources than you, that's a gut punch. That's disrespect without saying a word. But here's the part that's crazy. Going independent sounds good on paper, but it costs money, real money. You need to fund your own rollouts, your own videos, your own marketing, your own distribution deals, your own PR. When you're on a label, all of that is being handled, even if they're not pushing you the way you want. The moment you leave, all of that falls on you. And if your streaming numbers have been declining and the features aren't coming in, going indie is basically going into battle without armor. Some people close to the situation started saying that financially, things were getting tight. The streams were a fraction of what they used to be. The touring money wasn't what it was during the peak years. And without label backing, without that Interscope distribution muscle behind him, getting his music heard was becoming a real challenge. He started moving quietly. Less social media, less public appearances, less everything. And when a rapper who used to be everywhere suddenly goes quiet, people start asking questions. Where's Youngsta? What happened to him? Why isn't he dropping? Why is he gone ghost? Now I gotta get a little more serious for a second, because this part is real. Gang, Black Youngsta has gone through something that would break most people. He's lost multiple brothers to the streets of Memphis. Multiple, not one. Multiple brothers. And if you know anything about Memphis, you know those streets are unforgiving. He was trying to get his people out. He was rapping, he was grinding, he was making money. And he was trying to use that money to pull his family out of the environment that made him. And he kept losing them anyway. That kind of weight doesn't just affect you emotionally, it affects how you move. It affects your music, it affects your decisions, it affects whether you want to be in the spotlight or whether you'd rather stay in the dark because the spotlight brings attention. And in Memphis, attention can cost you everything. So when people ask, why did Youngsta go ghost? Some of it is label stuff, some of it is financial, but some of it is also just a man carrying more pain than anyone on the outside can really understand. And that's why I always say, we gotta be careful how we talk about artists who fall off, because we don't always know what they're going through behind closed doors. And all right, gang, here's the part you've been waiting for. And this is where the story comes full circle. Because the word on the street is that Youngsta has been making moves to get back in Gotti's good graces. That after going independent, after going ghost, after realizing that the label machine is something you cannot just replicate on your own overnight, he's been trying to get back to CMG. Now, let me be clear. Nobody has come out on camera and said Youngsta called Gotti begging, but the situation around him is telling a story, and sometimes the situation speaks louder than any quote. Think about it. His departure from CMG happened right around the time that a CMG affiliate was going through a trial connected to the Young Dolph murder case. The timing of Youngsta publicly separating himself from CMG right before all that legal heat started flaring up. Some people are saying that was intentional. Some are saying he was pushed out so the label could protect itself. Others are saying he left voluntarily and is now regretting it. Either way, the result is the same. Youngsta is out here without the infrastructure he had for nearly a decade. And when you've been signed to a label since 2015, when your entire career has been built with that infrastructure behind you, and then suddenly it's gone, that adjustment is brutal. There's a reason his most recent independent releases haven't generated the same numbers as his CMG-backed work. Not because the music is bad, but because distribution, marketing, and playlist placement matter. And those things cost money and connections that most independent artists simply do not have. So what does a guy do when he realizes going indie isn't working the way he hoped? When the streams aren't where they need to be, when the money is getting tight, when the label he built his career with has become the label that's thriving without him, you go back, or at least, you try. And by all accounts, that's exactly where Youngsta is right now, trying to figure out how to get back into the machine, trying to reconnect with Gotti, because without it, and this is the cold truth of the music business, even a talented artist from a legendary rap city can fade into nothing. Bro, that's actually insane. I'm not even lying. The same dude who crashed a video shoot just to get Gotti's attention back in 2015 is now in a position where he might need that same energy all over again just to stay relevant. Now let's talk about the money, because this is a conversation that needs to happen. A lot of people look at rappers who were buzzing in 2017 and 2018 and assume those guys are set for life. But gang, that is not how this industry works. When you're signed to a label, a lot of what looks like wealth is actually fronted. Advances, label money, per diem from tours, marketing budgets. All of that gets recouped, meaning the label takes it back from your royalties before you see a real check. So even if your album goes gold and your songs are getting millions of streams, if your advances were big enough, you might not see significant royalty money for years. And the lifestyle, the jewelry, the cars, the flexing, that comes fast and goes faster, especially when you've got family you're trying to take care of. Especially when you've lost people and you're spending on funerals and trying to help people in your community. That money moves. So when the label stops pushing your projects, streams start dropping, touring money slows down, and you're now independent with no promo budget, the math starts getting scary real fast. People close to the situation have been saying the same thing, that financially things are not where they used to be for Youngsta. And that is a devastating place to be for a man who worked his whole life to escape poverty. Going from private jet signings to watching your bank account shrink while your former label mates are signing 8-figure deals with Interscope, that's a nightmare. That is the part of the music industry nobody wants to talk about. They show you the rise, they show you the hits, they show you the Instagram flex, but they don't show you what happens when the machine stops. So where is he now? He has been releasing music independently under his Heavy Camp imprint. In 2024, he put out Black Sheep 2. In 2025, he released the Heavy Camp compilation, Checkmate. So the music is still coming. He hasn't completely gone silent, but the reception is a fraction of what it was during his CMG peak. No major label push, no Billboard charting, no big press coverage. His presence on social media has been inconsistent, showing up, then going quiet. And the conversations happening in Memphis rap circles are centered around one question: what's next? Because here's the real question, gang. And this is the one I want y'all to sit with. Is there a version of this story where Black Youngsta gets back to that level without Yo Gotti and CMG? Maybe. Memphis has produced independent legends. Young Dolph himself proved that you can build something massive without a major label. But Dolph built his independence when he was at his commercial peak, not after he'd already faded. Youngsta's window might be different, and the people around him know it, which is why the conversations about reconnecting with Gotti keep coming up, because sometimes the smartest move isn't pride. Sometimes the smartest move is picking up the phone and saying, look, whatever happened between us, let's figure it out, because I'm better inside this machine than outside of it. And that's the full story, gang. That's everything, from McMillan Street to crashing Gotti's video shoot, from signing on a private jet to going ghost, from gold records and Billboard charts to going independent and running out of runway. Black Youngsta is one of the most fascinating stories in Memphis rap because it's got everything: a real come-up, a loyalty that maybe went too far, a label situation that slowly squeezed him out, tragedy, loss, and now, the humbling. No cap, this is one of the wildest falls from inside a machine that I've seen in a long time. Because it wasn't a drug charge, it wasn't a major scandal, it was a slow fade, a quiet drift away from the people who built him. And now he's on the outside looking in at a label that's worth more than ever, and realizing that the door he helped build might be the door he needs to knock on again. Gang, if you watched all the way to the end, that means you're a real one. Real ones hit that like button. Real ones subscribe. Real ones leave a comment down below and tell me, do you think Yo Gotti should sign Black Youngsta again? Do you think Youngsta can rebuild on his own? Drop your thoughts. I read every single comment. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one, because I got more coming. And trust me, the next one, y'all are not ready. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.
Mannie Fresh is finally revealing how much Birdman stole from him, and the number that has been hiding behind years of silence is darker than anyone in hip-hop was prepared for. For over a decade, Mannie Fresh was the heartbeat of Cash Money Records. Every beat, every single hit, every platinum record that put that label on the map. That was him. That was his work and his craft. That was his genius being poured into a machine that was making other people extraordinarily rich. And while the world was watching Cash Money dominate charts, collect plaques, and build one of the most celebrated empires in rap history, Mannie Fresh was allegedly watching millions of dollars flow through a label he helped create, without ever seeing anything close to his fair share. Yo, what's good, fam? We about to dive deep into some real industry politics that have been shaking up the hip-hop community for decades. Because this is not just a story about a producer who did not get paid. This is a story about how one of the most talented and dedicated men to ever sit behind the boards was allegedly used as a tool, drained of his creative genius, and then left holding the short end of the stick while the label he helped build from the ground up counted the money his music made. And for years, Mannie kept quiet about it, chose his words carefully, kept the peace. But the truth has a way of eventually coming to the surface, and what has been coming out of Mannie Fresh's own mouth in interviews over the years paints a picture that is impossible to sit with quietly. Real talk, by the time this video is completely done, you are going to understand exactly what Mannie Fresh went through, and exactly why what Birdman allegedly did to him deserves to be talked about loudly and clearly. So let's get into it. Byron Otto Thomas was born on March 20th, 1969, in the 7th Ward of New Orleans, Louisiana. If you know anything about New Orleans, the 7th Ward is not just a neighborhood, it is a culture. A tight community built on brass bands, second lines, block parties, and a musical lineage that runs so deep it practically comes out of the ground. Byron grew up surrounded by that culture, and music was not something he discovered. It was something he was born into. His mother was a teacher. His father went by DJ Sabu, one of New Orleans' most respected local disc jockeys. A fixture on the city's circuit who understood sound systems and crowd energy the way other people understand their native language. From the time Byron was a young child, he was watching his father work the turntables, learning music the way other kids learned to read books. His parents understood his passion early and leaned into it, buying him musical instruments instead of regular toys for the holidays. That investment would pay off in ways nobody in that household could have predicted at the time. As a teenager, Byron started going by the name Mannie Fresh and began DJing school dances across New Orleans. He was not just spinning records, he was performing, putting on a full show. He brought an 808 drum machine to his sets, programming his own original beats over the music he was playing, layering live performance elements on top of everything to turn every event into something more than a party. He joined one of the city's earliest and most influential hip-hop crews, a group called New York Incorporated, which included a young woman named Mia X, who would later become one of No Limit Records' most important artists, alongside Denny D, a New York transplant who exposed the crew to East Coast DJ techniques like transforming and scratching that most New Orleans DJs had never even seen before. Mannie later described that period as a training camp, learning to do things without headphones, learning to read cues, absorbing every technique he could access. That hunger and discipline set him apart from everyone working the New Orleans club circuit. By the late 1980s, Manny had partnered with New Orleans rapper Gregory D, and together they became among the first homegrown hip-hop acts in the city to earn genuine local traction. A legendary session at C-Saint Studios, the iconic recording facility owned by Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Allen Toussaint, produced a track called Buck Jump Time, which became one of the most beloved early hip-hop records in New Orleans history. Their 1987 debut collaboration Throwdown followed, and Manny continued releasing material with Gregory D through the early 1990s, including The Real Deal on RCA Records in 1992. But the major label experience left a bad taste in his mouth. He watched firsthand how big corporations handle street music, slowly, carelessly, without the passion or urgency that the culture deserved. He walked away from that experience frustrated, wiser, and ready for something different. That something different came through the door in 1993, when Mannie Fresh crossed paths with two brothers from New Orleans who had a vision bigger than anything he had encountered before. Brian Williams, who went by the name Baby at the time, and his older brother Ronald, known as Slim, had founded a record label they called Cash Money Records 2 years earlier, in 1991. At that point, Cash Money was still a raw regional independent operation, pressing records and selling them out of the trunk, building a local buzz through sheer hustle, street credibility, and an intimate knowledge of what New Orleans music fans actually wanted to hear. Baby approached Manny with a direct offer: come be the in-house producer for Cash Money, handle all the beats, and help build this thing from the ground up. Manny accepted, and he later described the early days of Cash Money not as a traditional record label, but more like a group of street dudes who decided to try the music business. That description would prove more meaningful than anyone in the room realized at the time. Throughout the first half of the 1990s, Cash Money built its regional footprint one release at a time. Artists like Pimp Daddy, UNLV, Miss T, and Lil Slim moved hundreds of thousands of records independently across the South, with Mannie Fresh producing everything the label put out. No outside producers, no major label backing, just the in-house sound that Manny was developing in real time, mixing the syncopated drum patterns of New Orleans jazz drummers with the bounce music energy that filled the city's clubs, layering live instruments over heavy bass in a way that felt like New Orleans and nowhere else on earth. His signature touch, blasting horns, second line snare patterns, playful synth melodies over thick kicks, was becoming one of the most recognizable production identities in all of Southern hip-hop. By the mid-1990s, the roster expanded significantly. Cash Money signed a 12-year-old named Dwayne Carter, who would become Lil Wayne. BG was on the roster. Juvenile joined and brought an undeniable commercial magnetism that immediately elevated the label's prospects. Turk came on board. And in 1997, these four artists were grouped together as the Hot Boys, a supergroup that would become the vehicle Cash Money used to break nationally. Before any of the major crossover success happened, Juvenile independently released an album called Soldier Rags that moved 200,000 copies without any national distribution support. That number caught the attention of executives at Universal Records. At a time when Southern rap barely registered on the national radar, Cash Money was already moving serious units on its own, with nothing but a regional distribution network and Mannie Fresh behind the boards on every single track. That track record gave the Williams brothers the leverage to walk into a negotiation with one of the biggest music companies in the world and refuse to accept anything less than extraordinary terms. Let me break down for y'all exactly what that deal looked like, because this is where the story really starts to take shape. In March 1998, finalized in May of that year, Cash Money Records signed a $30 million pressing and distribution deal with Universal Records that is still considered one of the most favorable agreements ever negotiated by an independent label in the entire history of the music business. The deal, brokered with the help of music industry advocate Wendy Day and her organization, the Rap Coalition, gave Cash Money 85% of its royalties, retained the label's full ownership of all master recordings, and structured Universal's distribution fee at approximately 7%, meaning Universal handled the national logistics while Cash Money kept the overwhelming majority of the financial upside. The Williams brothers received a reported $2 to $3 million advance as part of the arrangement. According to people familiar with how the deal went down, Universal chairman Doug Morris himself entered the negotiation room after Birdman and Slim nearly walked out on a lowball offer from a lower-level executive. Hip-hop journalism called it the Louisiana Purchase, and the comparison was earned. What followed proved that every instinct the Williams brothers had about their commercial potential was completely correct. Cash Money's first major release under the Universal deal was Juvenile's November 1998 album 400 Degrees, an album produced entirely by Mannie Fresh. It peaked at number 9 on the Billboard 200 and ultimately sold more than 5 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling Southern rap albums of all time. It appears on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. The single Back That Ass Up, also produced entirely by Mannie Fresh, appears on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. Between 1998 and 2001, Cash Money released 18 top 5 Billboard singles and 11 platinum and multi-platinum albums, the near entirety of which were produced by one man. Between 2001 and 2003, the label sold an additional 7 million albums. The Hot Boys' Guerrilla Warfare went platinum. BG's Chopper City in the Ghetto went platinum. Lil Wayne's Stop Block Is Hot went platinum. Big Timer's Hood Rich debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and spawned the single Still Fly, which peaked at number 11 on the Hot 100 and earned 2 Grammy nominations. Mannie Fresh's production output during this era generated more than 23 million units sold worldwide, with 17 songs earning gold, platinum, or multi-platinum RIAA certifications. But here's where it gets real. While Cash Money was presenting the image of a unified, wealthy family, matching outfits, stacked jewelry, Bentleys and Ferraris in every music video, there was a financial structure underneath that success that many of the people who built it were reportedly never given a clear look at. Mannie Fresh was allegedly inside a business he helped create but had no real visibility into. The money was flowing, the empire was growing. But according to what Mannie has opened up about over the years, the man generating all of that value was being used without truly understanding the scale of what was being taken from him. Mannie Fresh has spoken openly about the nature of his contract and his compensation arrangements at Cash Money. The picture he describes is of a business operation that ran more like a street hustle than a formal corporation. In his 2005 cover story with The Fader, his first major press feature after leaving the label, he described approaching his work at Cash Money with the mentality of a brother building something with family, not as a hired hand carefully protecting his contractual rights and accounting obligations. He trusted them completely. He later acknowledged he was clearing around $50,000 or more per beat during the peak years. That number sounds significant until you hold it against the hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue those beats were generating for the label and the Williams brothers simultaneously. In a standard music industry framework, a producer is entitled to a percentage of mechanical royalties on each unit sold, typically 2 to 5% of the wholesale price, plus performance royalties from radio airplay and public performance, and publishing income from any songs they co-wrote. The Cash Money deal with Universal reportedly gave the label 50% of its publishing revenues as part of the broader agreement, still considered enormously favorable compared to what most independent labels received. But what any of that money actually looked like once it flowed through Cash Money's internal accounting to the people who created the music is a question that Mannie Fresh and several other Cash Money artists have been publicly raising for years, without ever receiving a fully transparent answer. Now this is where we got to address the broader pattern, because Mannie Fresh was not the only one asking these questions. Juvenile left Cash Money in 2001 after releasing Project English, citing financial reasons. When Cash Money refused to settle for $4 million, Juvenile took them to court and reportedly walked away with approximately $11 million. He returned to the label in 2003 for a $4 million deal, but signed over rights to his next album, Juve the Great, which sold over 1 million copies. BG departed citing financial mismanagement and never returned. Producer Bangladesh, who made one of Lil Wayne's biggest records, A Milli from Thought Carter 3, sued Cash Money in 2010 over royalties and told Vibe magazine directly that Cash Money does not pay royalties. Tyga later sued the label for $10 million, a situation made more troubling by the fact that Tyga had signed his original deal at 17 years old with a lawyer who also represented Cash Money, a textbook conflict of interest. And Wendy Day, the woman who negotiated the historic Universal deal on Cash Money's behalf and helped make the Williams brothers rich, has alleged that when she tried to collect her standard 5% finder's fee, Birdman's response was essentially to tell her to sue him. The list runs long. Every situation follows the same basic script. Somebody builds something, the money flows in, and the financial accounting that was supposed to flow back to the builder somehow gets stuck on the way. For Mannie Fresh, that reality reached a breaking point around 2004 and 2005. He released his solo debut, The Mind of Mannie Fresh, in 2004, a sprawling 30-track project featuring the single Real Big, which peaked at number 79 on the Billboard Hot 100 and demonstrated clearly that Mannie had the talent and the audience to operate on his own terms. But the professional relationship with Cash Money had already soured beyond repair. In 2005, Mannie officially departed the label. When asked in interviews why he left, he did not hide behind diplomatic language. He stated plainly that he left Cash Money because of money. Quote, scratch moolah. 3 words, 1 direct sentence, no ambiguity. The man who produced 400 Degrees, crafted Back That Ass Up, made Bling Bling a cultural phenomenon, built the sound of Hood, Rich, and Thigh Block as Hot, and Guerrilla Warfare and Chopper City in the Ghetto, and record after record for more than a decade. That man left the label he helped build because his compensation was not right. Following his departure, Mannie Fresh and Cash Money entered a legal period. In June 2006, All Hip Hop confirmed that Cash Money Records had reached a settlement with Mannie Fresh resolving the financial dispute. The terms of the agreement were not disclosed publicly and remain sealed to this day. Standard confidentiality clauses locked the specifics away, leaving the public with confirmation that something real had been disputed and resolved without ever knowing exactly what that resolution looked like or how much it was worth. What Mannie said around that time was that he had to do what he had to do, that the situation was simply not right, but that he still looked at the people at Cash Money like brothers and chose to move on rather than escalate everything into a prolonged and very public war. The question that has never fully gone away is how much Mannie Fresh actually lost. He has consistently implied in interviews that he was dramatically underpaid relative to the success he helped create, but he has never placed a specific dollar figure on those losses in any public statement. That number stays private, but we can look at the commercial record and put the scale into context. Juvenile's 400 Degrees alone sold 5 million copies at a late 1990s physical album wholesale price of roughly $12 per unit. That single album generated approximately $60 million in wholesale revenue. A producer properly entitled to even a 2% royalty on that one record would theoretically have been looking at over $1 million from that album alone. Before publishing royalties, performance royalties from radio play, sync licensing, or any other income streams. Multiply that math across 15 gold and platinum albums, 17 RIAA certified singles, and 23 million units sold total. And the financial picture that emerges around what Mannie should have received versus what he has described receiving becomes one of hip-hop's most striking and painful contrasts. On Birdman's side of this equation, the picture is genuinely complicated. Brian Williams has never publicly disrespected Mannie Fresh. In a 2018 interview with Billboard, he spoke about their relationship with evident warmth, acknowledging that he and Fresh had been through a lot together and pointing specifically to the fact that both men lost sisters during the years following their split. Mannie's sister, Angela Bryant, was murdered in 2007. Birdman experienced his own family tragedy around the same period. He told Billboard that their bond grew stronger through shared grief, and that Fresh put together their eventual Big Timers reunion tour himself. That detail really matters. It says something profound about the complexity of a relationship that cannot be reduced to a simple villain and victim story, even when the financial accusations are serious. That personal bond was what made the 2018 release of Designer Caskets so significant for the culture. Part of the Before Anything, the Cash Money Story documentary soundtrack on Apple Music, it was the first new Big Timers music in approximately 15 years, a reunion that fans had largely given up hoping for. Directed by Benny Boom and shot through the streets of New Orleans, the video featured cameos from Juvenile and Turk. Mannie's production was instantly recognizable. The melodies, the rhythm, the bounce underneath everything. It sounded like coming home. The willingness of Mannie Fresh to stand in a video alongside Birdman after all that had passed between them said something important about the man's character. In a 2020 appearance on the Breakfast Club radio show, Mannie summed up his approach with simple clarity. You live, you forgive, and you keep it moving. Forgiveness and justice are not the same thing. But for Mannie Fresh, peace came first. After leaving Cash Money, Manny rebuilt his career with quiet consistency and genuine dignity. He signed with Def Jam South. He formed his own subsidiary label, Chubby Boy Records. He released his second solo album, Return of the Ballin', in October 2009, featuring Rick Ross and Lil Jon. He produced for T.I., Young Jeezy, Drake, Kanye West 2012 Cruel Summer Project, Mos Def, Mystical, Trina, and many others. His beat for Lil Wayne's Go DJ went double platinum. He performed globally as a DJ, played the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, mentored younger producers, and became a respected elder statesman in hip-hop who never needed Cash Money's name attached to continue working at the highest levels of the industry. Then in April 2023, Reservoir Media, a publicly traded independent music company based in New York, announced the acquisition of Mannie Fresh's entire catalog, covering both his publishing rights and his recorded music rights. The price was not disclosed, but the transaction confirmed what the music industry had always understood. The body of work Mannie Fresh built at Cash Money is one of the most commercially durable catalogs in the history of Southern rap. Reservoir's own announcement credited him with producing nearly all songs across 15 multi-platinum, platinum, or gold albums from 1998 to 2004, and noted that his catalog continues to be sampled by Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and Youngboy Never Broke Again. That deal is as close to an official industry appraisal of Mannie Fresh's legacy as anything that has ever been put on paper. Birdman, meanwhile, continued building Cash Money into a machine that extended well beyond its founding roster. The signings of Drake and Nicki Minaj in the late 2000s created a second commercial era that dwarfed even the label's late 1990s peak, with Lil Wayne's Young Money Entertainment running as an imprint under the broader Cash Money umbrella. But the financial disputes never stopped following the label. Lil Wayne filed a $51 million lawsuit against Cash Money in 2014, alleging non-payment of a promised advance, failure to register his name on proper copyrights, and a long list of grievances that echoed everything Mannie Fresh, Juvenile, BG, Bangladesh, and every other Cash Money departure had said before. Wayne's legal battle was public, prolonged, and deeply personal. It was eventually resolved in 2018 with terms that were, in keeping with Cash Money tradition, never disclosed. At the end of the day, the story of Mannie Fresh and Birdman is not simply about money, though money sits at the absolute center of it. It is about what happens when a business relationship is never formally defined. When two people from different backgrounds, with different expectations and different definitions of fairness, build something extraordinary together without ever sitting down and establishing clearly what each person is owed. Birdman came from the streets and carried a street mentality into the business. You handle things in the family. You do not necessarily create paper trails when you trust the people around you. Mannie Fresh came in as a creative talent who trusted that brotherhood would be enough. He produced every record, he showed up every day. He gave everything he had to the music, and he assumed, the way people who love their craft often assume, that the people benefiting most from his work would recognize and properly reward what he gave. That assumption ultimately cost him years of income he will never recover. The real question that hip-hop fans will continue debating for decades to come is whether what happened to Mannie Fresh was intentional exploitation or the inevitable consequence of an informal business structure that was simply never built to account fairly for everyone inside it. Mannie has chosen not to call it theft in any public statement. He has actively chosen peace and forgiveness over prolonged bitterness. But peace is not accounting, and forgiveness is not the same as saying things were right. The music Mannie Fresh made is still generating money. It is being sampled and streamed and celebrated. It is on greatest of all time lists, and the man who made it spent years fighting for basic financial recognition of what he contributed, reaching a settlement whose terms he is legally prohibited from discussing, and eventually selling his catalog to a company that had the sense to recognize value that his original business partners apparently never properly paid him for. What makes Mannie Fresh's legacy extraordinary is that it survived all of it. The dispute, the departure, the legal proceedings, the years of rebuilding, the grief of losing his sister, the silence, none of it could erase what he created or diminish the magnitude of what he contributed to hip-hop. You cannot unring the bell of 400 Degrees. You cannot uncreate Back That Ass Up. You cannot pretend Still Fly did not earn 2 Grammy nominations, or that Bling Bling did not enter the dictionary as a legitimate cultural artifact. The music lives. The music moves and breathes. The music is still touching people who were not born when it was recorded. Some of the greatest hip-hop producers in history have built their understanding of what Southern rap can sound like by studying the records that Mannie Fresh made in the New Orleans studio with nothing but his drum machines, his keyboards, and his ear for what made people feel something. That is not a small footnote in hip-hop history. That is the foundation. That is what Mannie Fresh built. The empire may have failed him financially, but the sound belongs to history. And now that he is opening up about what really happened, the rest of hip-hop is finally beginning to fully account for what one of its greatest architects was never fully paid. What do you think about what Mannie Fresh went through at Cash Money? And what does his story tell us about how the music industry has historically treated the producers and creators who actually build the sounds that generate billions of dollars for the executives at the top? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and check out the video on screen for more deep dives into the stories that shape Southern hip-hop history.
And they bought the entire 300. Now, when the purchase happens, P gets the 300 million. Is an artist owed money if the label you helped build gets sold? Baby doesn't own part of QC. Now, if they did the deal for 150 million for Lil Baby's career, Lil Baby would have gotten paid from Hybe because he would have to re-sign to Hybe. So it would have been an all-in-one deal. Because they end up buying all the contracts and catalog, that doesn't have anything to do with Baby. Baby was owned by QC. Now Baby's just owned by whoever who owns QC. So basically you don't need Baby at all. So essentially they get 300 million.
$500 million. Let that number breathe for a second. Not from a tech startup, not from a hedge fund, from rap music, from Atlanta, from a man who most people had never heard of while his artists were selling out arenas, breaking streaming records, and becoming some of the most recognizable names on the planet. And the reason that number is so controversial is not just because of how large it is because of who created the value that made it possible and how little of that number ended up in those people's hands. This is the story of Pierre Thomas, known in the industry as QCP. This is the story of quality control music. And this is the story of how one executive quietly positioned himself to collect the biggest check in hip-hop business history, while the artists whose music made that check possible watched it happen from the outside. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. Now, before we get into this, let me keep it 100 with y'all right now. This story is going to make some of you uncomfortable because it is not just about one man doing something wrong. It is about a system that was designed to work exactly this way, and about one man who understood that system better than anyone around him and used it to perfection. We are talking about lawsuits, contract disputes, conflict of interest allegations, a corporate acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and the very specific question of whether the artists who built quality control into a dynasty ever had a real chance at seeing what their work was actually worth. Let's get into it. Pierre Thomas grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you know anything about Atlanta's music history, you know that city does not produce passive observers. Atlanta gave the world Outkast, T.I., Gucci Mane, Young Jeezy, and eventually the entire trap sound that would come to dominate American popular music for a decade. To operate in that ecosystem at any meaningful level, you had to be sharp. You had to see angles that other people were not seeing. Pierre Thomas was sharp in exactly that way. Not as a producer, not as a rapper, but as someone who understood the architecture of how money moved in the music business and where you needed to be positioned to capture the most of it. His partnership with Kevin Coach K. Lee was the foundation of everything. Coach K has spent years in the industry as a manager and connector, building relationships at the highest levels of Atlanta's music scene. Together, Pierre and Coach K identified something that the traditional label system had not yet fully processed, that the internet was rewriting the rules of how artists got discovered, how they built audiences, and how they generated commercial power. Mixtape culture had already given Atlanta a template for how to move outside of radio and traditional promotion. Social media was turning that template into a complete alternative industry. And if you could position yourself as the structure that developed artists in that pre-mainstream window, before the majors came calling, before the artists understood their leverage, before the bidding war, you would own the most valuable period of that artist's trajectory. That was the insight behind quality control music, which Pierre and Coach K launched formally around 2013. But here's where it gets real, because the insight itself is not what made QC powerful. What made QC powerful was the specific way they translated that insight into contracts. When you sign an artist before they're famous, before they have attorneys who specialize in music deals, before they have managers with industry experience, before they have anyone sitting across the table who can fully explain what the long-term implications of each clause actually mean, you are in an extraordinarily powerful negotiating position. And Quality Control used that position consistently with almost every major artist they ever signed. The first group that proved the model could work on a massive scale was Migos. Quavo, Takeoff, and Offset were three young men from Gwinnett County, Georgia. Their sound was immediately distinct, a triplet flow that stacked syllables in a hypnotic percussive pattern that felt completely new while being rooted in trap's fundamentals. QC signed them and began developing them through a series of mixtapes. Their 2013 mixtape Young Rich Niggas built regional buzz. Their 2014 record Versace, originally built on a Meek Mill beat, went viral in a way that demonstrated exactly how powerful internet culture had become. Drake jumped on a remix, and suddenly Migos had national visibility without a major promotional machine behind them. Quality Control had done what they set out to do. They had found talent before the world caught up, and they had locked them in. Over the following years, QC helped develop the Migos brand through additional projects while navigating a joint venture structure that involved distribution relationships with 300 Entertainment and eventually partnerships with Motown Records and Capitol Music Group. These structures gave QC commercial reach without the label surrendering total control at the top. And then in 2017, everything the label had been building exploded into something no one could have predicted at that scale. Migos released Culture, and it was not just a successful album, it was a cultural detonation. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. The single Bad and Bougie featuring Lil Uzi Vert had already been sitting at #1 on the Hot 100 for 7 consecutive weeks before the album even dropped. Donald Glover shouted out Migos at the Golden Globes. The phrase, "raindrop, drop top," became part of the American vocabulary. Migos were no longer a rap group, they were a mainstream phenomenon. Culture 2 followed in 2018, debuting at #1 and moving over 200,000 album equivalent units in its first week. Quality Control was now one of the most powerful names in the music business. And here is where you need to understand what that success actually meant financially, because this is central to everything that comes next. When Migos sold records and generated streams under the Quality Control structure, the revenue from those masters flowed to the label first. The label recouped advances in recording costs from the artist's royalty share before the artist saw meaningful income from recordings. Meanwhile, Pierre Thomas held equity in Quality Control as a company. Every hit record Migos made, every streaming milestone, every magazine cover, every sold-out tour that raised their profile, all of it was simultaneously building the commercial value of Quality Control as an asset. The artists were generating the cultural and commercial product. The executive held the ownership stake in the structure that captured the value of that product. That distinction, which sounds like a technical business detail, is actually the entire story. But here's where it gets darker, because Migos did not just accept this arrangement quietly as they became global stars. The friction between the group and the business structures around them became public in a serious way, starting in 2019. That year, Migos filed a lawsuit against their former attorney, Damian Granderson. The lawsuit was detailed, and the allegations were pointed. The group alleged that Granderson had engaged in a fundamental conflict of interest by simultaneously representing both Migos and Quality Control in matters where those two parties had directly opposing interests. Think about what that means for a second. Your lawyer is supposed to be working exclusively for you. He is supposed to sit across the table from the label and fight for your best terms. But if that same attorney is also being paid by or otherwise representing the label that you are negotiating against, you do not actually have representation. You have the appearance of representation without the substance of it. And the group alleged that agreements they entered under that arrangement were structured in ways that benefited Quality Control at Migos' expense. Granderson denied the allegations, and the case was eventually settled, meaning no court ever issued a public ruling on the merits. But that settlement did not close the story. It opened it. Because what the lawsuit put on public record was a picture of how business had been conducted around Migos during the most important contractual period of their careers. It raised the very specific question of whether three young men from Gwinnett County who had never navigated a music industry contract before, had ever actually had someone fully in their corner when the paperwork was being signed. And the answer to that question, based on what was alleged, was no. Think about the timeline here. Migos signed with Quality Control when they were unknown. They did not have access to entertainment attorneys who specialized in protecting young artists from unfavorable clauses. They did not have managers with decades of experience warning them about recoupment structures and ownership splits. They had raw talent, a regional buzz, and a label that was willing to put resources behind them. In that moment, most people would sign whatever was put in front of them. And the specific allegation in that lawsuit was that the person who was supposed to protect their legal interests in those agreements was also at minimum conflicted in his relationship with Quality Control. That is not a minor procedural problem. That is a foundational problem with how the entire contractual relationship was established. The public fallout from these disputes eventually contributed to one of the most talked about fractures in rap, the deteriorating relationship between Migos and Quality Control. Members of the group made public statements and social media posts over the years that reflected genuine dissatisfaction with their business situation. Offset made comments in interviews that pointed to feeling locked into arrangements that no longer reflected the commercial reality of what Migos had become. The group's tensions with the label became part of the public conversation around their later albums and their eventual individual pursuits. The tragic death of Takeoff in November 2022 brought the Migos chapter to an end in a way no one wanted. But before that happened, the story of how three men from Georgia had gone from global superstars to publicly frustrated artists under the same label roof had already been told loudly enough for the entire industry to hear. People who had watched that arc drew a very specific conclusion. QCP had finessed Migos. That was the narrative, and it did not come from nowhere. Now let's talk about Lil Baby, because this is where the story reaches its most commercially significant chapter and where the public narrative around Pierre Thomas becomes the most intense. Dominique Jones grew up in Atlanta with no real intention of becoming a rapper. Quality Control found him, pushed him into a recording booth almost experimentally, and what came out was undeniable. His conversational delivery, his emotional honesty, his ability to make street narratives feel both cinematic and deeply personal. It clicked immediately. QC signed him and began investing in his development. What happened next was not gradual. It was a detonation. Lil Baby's 2018 mixtape Harder Than Ever established him as one of the most exciting new voices in rap. Street gossip later that year confirmed it was not an accident. And then in 2020, My Turn happened. My Turn debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. It spent multiple weeks at the top. It generated streaming numbers that placed Lil Baby among the most listened to artists on the planet. Songs like Emotionally Scarred, We Paid, and The Bigger Picture, which became a genuine anthem during one of the most significant social justice moments in recent American history, showed that Baby had transcended rap category and was operating at a level where culture, commerce, and politics converged. He was not just a successful rapper, he was a once-in-a-generation commercial force. And here is the thing you need to understand about what Lil Baby's success meant for Quality Control as a company. Migos had made QC relevant. Lil Baby made QC valuable in a way that attracts the kind of buyer who writes 9-figure checks. His streaming numbers were extraordinary, consistently among the highest in the entire genre, not just among new artists, but across all of rap. By 2021 and 2020, Lil Baby was frequently the most streamed rapper in the world on a week-to-week basis. His touring power was elite. Arenas sold out. Festivals paid premium headliner rates. His brand partnerships, fashion relationships, and celebrity connections extended his commercial footprint far beyond music into the kind of lifestyle territory that makes a label catalog attractive to a global entertainment company. He was not just moving numbers, he was creating the kind of artist identity that compounds in value over time. The kind that a company like Have, which specializes in building global artist brands with multi-generational staying power, would look at and see as the anchor of an entire enterprise. Every single stream that Lil Baby generated flowed revenue through Quality Control's distribution structure. Every dollar his music earned from licensing, from sync deals, from commercial partnerships tied to his recordings, all of it ran through the label. His name and his commercial trajectory were a central part of the pitch that made the Hive acquisition conversation possible. When corporate evaluators looked at Quality Control and tried to determine what the catalog was worth, what the revenue projections looked like, and whether $300 million was a rational number to put on the table. Lil Baby's numbers were the most important numbers in that room. He was the engine, and he did not own the vehicle. Now let's talk about what happened in 2023. Hyatt America, the American subsidiary of South Korean entertainment giant Hyatt, the corporation behind BTS, one of the most valuable entertainment companies in the world, announced the acquisition of Quality Control Music for a reported $320 million. $320 million. Pierre Thomas and Coach K were reported to retain executive roles. The deal was framed publicly as a global expansion opportunity, and in the hip-hop business conversation, it was immediately recognized as one of the most significant financial exits in the history of the genre. The equity from that sale went to the people who held ownership stakes in Quality Control Music, not to the artists signed to the label, not to Lil Baby, whose music had made the label worth buying, not to Migos, who had made QC a household name, to the executives who held the equity. That is technically how corporate acquisitions work. It is also, depending on how you look at it, the clearest possible illustration of the gap between who creates value and who owns the structure that captures it. The internet did not need much time to process this. The narrative spread fast, and it was specific. People started doing math publicly. They pointed out that Lil Baby had been the most commercially dominant artist on the QC roster during the exact years that would have inflated the label's valuation most significantly for acquisition purposes. They pointed out that his streaming catalog, his active commercial momentum, his brand, and his cultural moment were almost certainly the primary assets a buyer like Hybe was paying for. And they pointed out that when the $320 million check cleared, the person cashing it was Pierre Thomas, not the artist whose music had made the label worth that much. Social media ran with it. Podcasts covered it in depth. YouTube channels like this one broke down the business structure so people could understand exactly what had happened. The phrase QP Snake Lil Baby started appearing everywhere. It became one of the defining hip-hop business conversations of 2023. And the reason it hit so hard is not just because of the money. It is because of the relationship. Lil Baby was not some random artist QC picked up at his commercial peak. QC found him before he had made a single song professionally. They invested in him when he was unknown. They built him, and that origin story, which QCP had used for years as evidence of his genuine commitment to his artists, suddenly looked like something else when you put it against the backdrop of a 9-figure exit that Baby did not share in. If you build someone from nothing, and then you sell the company that their name built for $320 million, and they don't see equity from that transaction, the question of whether you built them or built them for yourself becomes unavoidable. That is the question the internet was asking in 2023, and Pierre Thomas did not provide a public answer that satisfied it. Now here's what we have to be precise about, because this is where confirmed reporting and public narrative start to diverge. The specific terms of Lil Baby's recording agreement with Quality Control have never been disclosed publicly. Whether he sought to renegotiate his deal before the Hybe acquisition, whether he pushed for equity and was denied, whether he explored leaving QC for an independent structure, none of that has been confirmed through on-record reporting in detail. What is public is that Lil Baby remains signed to Quality Control through the acquisition and continued releasing music under that structure. There were strong industry rumors and fan discussions around whether Baby had considered or pursued greater independence, and given his commercial leverage, at that point those conversations would have made complete logical sense. But the specifics of what he knew, when he knew it, and what options were presented to him are not fully in the public record. What is absolutely in the public record is the outcome. Pierre Thomas walked away from the Hybe deal as one of the wealthiest executives in hip-hop history. Lil Baby, by all public accounts, did not share in that equity payout. And the people who watched that happen drew a conclusion that became one of the most discussed topics in rap media. That QCP had used the standard tools of the music industry, the early signing, the long-term recording agreement, the label equity structure, to extract maximum value from the artists whose talent had created that value, and then had exited with the check before those artists fully understood what had been built on their backs. That is the finesse narrative. And whether you call it genius or exploitation depends almost entirely on which side of the ownership table you believe those artists should have been sitting on. But here's where we got to address both sides of this honestly, because the story does not end with QCP as a straightforward villain, and that framing, while emotionally satisfying, misses something important. The case for Pierre Thomas as a visionary executive is also real. Before Quality Control, Migos were unsigned. Before Quality Control, Lil Baby had never been in a professional recording studio. The label did not just distribute these artists, it built them. It invested real money before there was any commercial return. It provided infrastructure, creative guidance, marketing expertise, and the kind of patient development that most major labels do not offer to unknown artists from the street. Pierre Thomas and Coach K identified talent that no one else was moving on, and they spent years and real capital turning that talent into global brands. The Hy-B acquisition was not a theft. From one perspective, it was a return on risk taken at a time when no one else believed enough to take it. The problem with that argument is not that it is false. It is that it only tells half the story, because the other half is about the specific terms under which that development happened, and whether young artists from Atlanta who had never navigated a music industry contract had any realistic ability to understand what they were agreeing to. The conflict of interest allegations in the Migos lawsuit were not a minor footnote. They were a direct challenge to the idea that proper process was followed in protecting those artists' interests. When your attorney is also working for the other side of your deal, you are not in a negotiation. You are in a performance of a negotiation. And if that is how the foundational agreements at QC were structured, then the fairness of every contract that came out of that process is legitimately open to question. There is also the matter of what development actually looks like from the artist's perspective versus the label's perspective. From the label's view, you invested money, provided resources, took a risk, and deserved to be compensated for that risk. From the artist's view, you gave up the ownership of everything you created during the most formative years of your career. And the person who held that ownership walked away with a generational amount of wealth while you received royalties and advances that, however large, do not compare to what your catalog was sold for. Both of those things can be true simultaneously, and the fact that they are both true is exactly why these stories generate so much heat. It is not a clean villain story. It is a story about a system that was designed to create exactly this outcome, and about one man who was very, very good at operating inside it. The real kicker, though, is this. Pierre Thomas did not invent any of this. The structure of record deals where labels own masters, where artists recoup from royalties while labels profit from catalog, where executives hold equity and artists hold recording agreements, that has been the music industry's architecture for decades. What QCP did was master it. He executed it in an era when artists and their communities were becoming increasingly aware that ownership was the variable that mattered most. And he did so by locking in agreements before that awareness had fully arrived. Whether that was opportunistic or visionary is a question the music business is still trying to answer. What it definitely did was change the conversation. After the Hype deal became public, artists throughout hip-hop started asking different questions, not just about masters, but about everything. About 360 deals which give labels a cut of touring revenue, merchandise, and endorsements on top of recording royalties. About recoupment clauses and which expenses get charged against an artist's account. About whether promotional budgets that the label decides to spend should be deducted from what the artist is owed. Artists started demanding independent legal representation from attorneys who had no relationship with the label before signing anything. They started asking for reversion clauses that allowed them to reclaim their masters after delivering a certain number of albums. Some artists started negotiating for profit participation and label equity directly, which had been nearly unheard of in standard recording agreements at earlier points in the industry's history. The education that used to happen quietly in back rooms started happening publicly, in interviews, in podcasts, in social media posts from artists to their fans. Travis Scott built Cactus Jack with equity and leverage in mind from the beginning. Kendrick Lamar's move away from Top Dog Entertainment to his own PG Lang structure was widely read as a deliberate choice to operate with complete ownership over his creative and commercial output at every level. Drake's arrangements through OVO Sound and his relationship with Republic and Universal reflected a constant negotiation for more catalog control and a larger share of commercial upside. Young Thug's slime language infrastructure, 21 Savage's careful and deliberate approach to deal structuring, the entire generation of artists who came up after QC's peak, they all arrived at the table with more information and more specific demands than the generation before them had. That shift happened for a lot of reasons, but the story of Quality Control's rise and sale is one of the clearest examples of what it was a shift away from. Publishing became an obsession. After years of artists signing away their publishing rights without fully grasping the long-term value of those rights, the understanding of what publishing actually generates, mechanical royalties, performance royalties, sync fees, sub-publishing income across international markets, became widespread in a way it had never been before. When Taylor Swift's very public battle over her master recordings with Scooter Braun reached mainstream conversation, it accelerated hip-hop's own reckoning with the exact same issue, but applied to rap catalogs. The two conversations were happening in parallel, and they were feeding each other. Ownership became the defining topic of the music business in the early 2020s, and Quality Control's story was Exhibit A for why. And here's the reflection that sits at the center of all of this. In the music industry, in any industry built on creative output, the people who end up with the most are rarely the most talented. They are the people who understood ownership first. Pierre Thomas did not have more talent than Lil Baby. He did not have more cultural insight than Migos. What he had was a structural understanding of where value accumulates in the music business and the discipline to position himself there before the people he was dealing with understood what was being decided. Whether that is genius depends on whether you think the rules of that game are fair. And whether those rules are fair depends on whether the people most affected by them ever had a genuine opportunity to understand them before they agreed to be bound by them. The people who look like villains in music business stories are sometimes simply the people who understood ownership first. And the people who look like victims are sometimes simply the people who created all the value and got to the ownership conversation too late. Which one of those things you think happened at Quality Control Music says as much about what you believe about fairness, access, and who the music business was built to serve, as it does about Pierre Thomas himself. Because underneath all the numbers and the lawsuits and the acquisition headlines, this is a story about information, about who had it, when they had it, and what they did with it. The artists who built Quality Control had the talent. Pierre Thomas had the information. And in the music business, information about ownership has always been worth more than talent at the negotiating table. That is the lesson this story keeps teaching. And the fact that we are still learning it after decades of artists losing catalog and equity to executives who arrived at the ownership table first tells you everything about how slowly that lesson travels. What are your honest thoughts on how the music business handles ownership and who actually benefits when artists reach global success? Drop it in the comments below. Let's talk about it and get into it. And check out the video on screen for more stories that go this deep into the business side of hip-hop.
Ben 10 got shot, not in some random street altercation. This was connected to a beef so deep it involves one of the most powerful men in Houston rap history and one of the most untouchable names in the streets right now. J. Prince versus NBA Youngboy. And what most people don't know is that J. Prince's own son is the reason Ben 10 took those bullets. We're breaking down the full timeline, the robbery, the clout accusations, the banned order, and how this whole thing is escalating into something that could get a lot more people hurt. Y'all need to hear this. Before we get into the smoke, let's make sure everybody in the room understands who J. Prince actually is. Because if you're sleeping on his resume, you don't understand why this beef hitting different than your average rap industry drama. James Prince, the real name for the people in the back, is the founder of Rap-A-Lot Records. He built that label from the ground up in Houston, Texas back in 1986. Let me put that in perspective for you. When Houston rap was a punchline to the rest of the country, J. Prince was already building an empire. Ghetto Boys, Scarface, UGK got distribution through him. He has his fingerprints on the foundation of Southern hip-hop in a way that very few people can claim. But here's the thing about J. Prince that goes beyond the music business. The man is connected in ways that the industry doesn't even talk about publicly. When Tekashi 6ix9ine was getting extorted, it was J. Prince's name that came up in those conversations as someone who could make problems go away. When Drake and Meek Mill had beef escalating into something dangerous, J. Prince stepped in and mediated. There are stories about J. Prince walking into situations where federal agents couldn't tread and coming out with results. In Houston, this man is not just respected, he's revered. His word carries weight that goes beyond contracts and publishing deals. When J. Prince says you're welcome somewhere, doors open. And when J. Prince says you're not welcome, that's a different conversation entirely. So when we start talking about NBA Youngboy, A 20-something-year-old from Baton Rouge who's the biggest independent artist in the game right now, and Jay Prince on the same timeline? That's not just beef between two people. That's a collision between two different worlds of power. Now let me give you the young boy side of this, because you need to understand who Jay Prince is actually dealing with here. And gang, this ain't your average rapper we're talking about. Kentrell Gaulden, NBA YoungBoy, came up in Baton Rouge the hard way. No cap, the man was literally incarcerated as a teenager, and when he got out, he was putting out music at a rate that didn't make sense. Songs, mixtapes, collaborations, the frequency was insane, and the streets ate it up because it was authentic. It sounded like somebody who'd actually lived what he was rapping about because he had. What makes YoungBoy different from most artists in his position is that he operates on a completely different axis than the traditional industry. He doesn't need radio. He doesn't need a major label cosign. He built his fan base, the Never Broke Again soldiers, into a movement that generates streaming numbers that embarrass artists with 10 times the budget. We're talking about the most streamed artist on YouTube multiple years running. That's not an accident. That's a real connection with real people. But here's what makes the YoungBoy situation complicated when it comes to beef. The man is fiercely loyal and fiercely territorial about his integrity. If YoungBoy feels like somebody is moving on him sideways, whether it's industry politics, fake love, or clout chasing, he responds. Every time, on wax, on social media, or through the people around him. He's been banned from multiple cities because of his associations and legal situations. He caught a federal gun case. He's been under house arrest. He relocated to Utah, of all places, partly because of legal restrictions and partly because he needed distance from the chaos. And yet, from Utah, this man is still dominating the culture, still dropping music, still at war. That's the person that Jay Prince decided to make an enemy out of. And the sequence of events that created this situation? It starts with a robbery in 2020 that should have been a simple resolution, but became the spark that lit this entire fire. All right, fam, here's where the real story begins. 2020. YoungBoy is in Houston. Now, YoungBoy in Houston is already a complicated situation because that's Jay Prince territory. Historically, culturally, undeniably. But YoungBoy isn't thinking about politics. He's moving how he moves. Here's what happened. YoungBoy got robbed in Houston. His chain, his jewelry, gone. Now in the streets, getting robbed is already a major violation, but getting robbed in somebody else's city adds another layer because it raises the question, how does somebody move on a high-profile artist in a city that has that kind of oversight without somebody at least knowing it was about to happen? That's the undercurrent. That's what people were whispering about. Not necessarily that Jay Prince authorized it or even knew, but that in a city where Jay Prince's presence is felt that deeply, how does something like that go down without any intelligence about it? But here's where it gets crazy, and this is the part that actually created the public rift. Jay Prince got the stuff back. Now, whether it was through his connects, through street pressure, through the network he's built over decades, however it happened, Jay Prince was able to recover YoungBoy's belongings. And most people would say that's a good look. That's somebody using their influence to help a fellow artist who got done wrong. Except Jay Prince didn't just handle it quietly. He went online. He made a public statement letting YoungBoy know, call me, I got your stuff, come get it. And from the outside looking in, you might think, okay, what's the problem? He's trying to help. But here's the real tea. YoungBoy did not see it that way. Not even close. In YoungBoy's mind, and this is consistent with how he operates and how he's spoken about it, that public announcement was not an act of generosity. That was a power move. That was Jay Prince putting himself in a position where he could say, I'm the one who made this right for YoungBoy. I'm the reason he got his stuff back. In the streets, that kind of positioning matters. It creates a dynamic where you owe somebody, or at the very least, where somebody can publicly claim they did something for you. YoungBoy is not the type to play that game. He's not going to call Jay Prince on a recorded line or a witnessed conversation to collect his own belongings in a way that makes it look like he's coming to Jay Prince hat in hand. Because in his mind, that's exactly what Jay Prince wanted. The optics of YoungBoy needing him, of YoungBoy having to come to Houston and acknowledge Jay Prince's power to get his own property back. No cap, YoungBoy would rather leave the jewelry in Houston than play that chess game. And that's exactly what it looked like he was prepared to do. The accusation of clout chasing was real in YoungBoy's camp. Why go online? Why make it public? If you're genuinely trying to help somebody, you find a way to get word to them privately. You don't broadcast it to the culture. The fact that it was public created the narrative that Jay Prince was using YoungBoy's robbery as an opportunity to show his own reach, and YoungBoy wasn't here for it at all. So instead of a situation that gets resolved quietly, jewelry returned, respect shown, both sides move on, you've got a public fracture. YoungBoy never publicly thanked Jay Prince, never made that call publicly, and that silence in this world speaks volumes. Now let's fast forward because this is where the situation goes from industry politics and bruised egos to actual violence. And this is the part that most people covering this story have been getting wrong or leaving out entirely. Ben 10. If you're not familiar with the name, Ben 10 is one of YoungBoy's people, part of his inner circle associated with the Never Broke Again movement, somebody who moves with YoungBoy or in connection to his world, and Ben 10 got shot. But here's what really happened, and this is the part that needs to be broken down properly because the connection to J. Prince's family changes everything about how we understand this beef. J. Prince has a son, and his son was involved in a situation that created the chain of events that led to Ben 10 taking those shots. Here's what went down. J. Prince's son was the one who sent YoungBoy's brother. We're talking about somebody in YoungBoy's bloodline to go fight. A fight was organized or instigated, and the setup involved YoungBoy's brother being sent into a confrontation that J. Prince's son had a hand in arranging. The fight happens, and what comes after the fight is that Ben 10 gets shot. Now connect those dots. J. Prince's son is setting up fights involving people in YoungBoy's camp and family, and people connected to YoungBoy are ending up shot as a consequence. This is not a coincidence that the streets are willing to overlook. This is seen as direct aggression. This is J. Prince's bloodline moving against YoungBoy's bloodline and someone getting shot in the process. That's not beef anymore. That's war language. Think about what this means from YoungBoy's perspective. You're already tight with J. Prince because you felt disrespected over the 2020 robbery situation. You already feel like he was using your misfortune to position himself. And now his son is out here setting up situations that result in your people getting shot. That's confirmation for YoungBoy of everything he already believed about where J. Prince stood. And here's the thing about YoungBoy that people don't fully appreciate. He takes loyalty and disloyalty with extreme seriousness. This man has songs, multiple songs, about betrayal, about people moving wrong, about consequences for those who violate. It's not just rap performance, it's documentation of how he actually moves in the world. So Ben 10 getting shot in the context of J. Prince's son being involved in the setup, in YoungBoy's world, that requires a response. The question is what form that response takes. Now let's be clear about what we know and what we don't. The official narratives around Ben 10's shooting are not fully public in terms of charges, convictions, or confirmed attributions. But the streets have been talking, the connections have been drawn, and the timing and the circumstances point directly to the escalating tension between these two camps. This ain't random. Nobody in either camp is pretending it's random. Now here's where people started connecting the dots and realizing that the J. Prince versus YoungBoy situation is operating on multiple levels simultaneously. This isn't just about a chain, a public post, and a fight that went wrong. There are layers to this that go back to fundamental questions about power, territory, and who controls what in the rap game. Let's talk about territory first. J. Prince built his influence in Houston over 4 decades. He is the architect of the city's position in hip-hop. When you talk about Houston rap, the culture, the sound, the business infrastructure, J. Prince's fingerprints are everywhere. That city is, in a very real sense, his domain in the way that few cities can claim to belong to any single figure in rap history. YoungBoy, being from Baton Rouge, is not bowing to anybody's territorial claims. That's not how he operates. He's the type of artist who moves where he wants to move, builds what he builds, and doesn't ask permission. But in doing that, in coming through Houston and then publicly, through his silence and later through his associates' words signaling that he doesn't respect J. Prince's position, he's essentially challenged that territorial authority. And J. Prince is not the type to let that slide without response either. So you have two personalities who are both essentially immovable objects meeting each other. Neither one is built for backing down. But here's the real tea about why this particular beef is concerning people on a much deeper level than your average rap drama. J. Prince's connections go into places that most people don't want to publicly acknowledge. His relationship with law enforcement, with legal structures, with people of influence in Texas and beyond, that's a different kind of power than what most rap beef involves. Most beef is between artists or between street organizations. This is beef between an artist and someone who moves in corridors of power that are partially invisible. And on YoungBoy's side, the Never Broke Again movement is not just a music label. It's a network of people who are intensely loyal to YoungBoy personally. People who have demonstrated that loyalty in ways that go beyond streaming his music. He has built genuine, real-world allegiance that makes any move against him or his people a move against a much larger body. So when you put those two power structures in conflict, J. Prince's institutional, connected power versus YoungBoy's grassroots, street-level loyalty, you've got a collision that isn't going to resolve itself easily, because neither side has an obvious weak point that the other can exploit without serious consequence. The clout-chasing accusation also tells you something important about Youngboy's psychology in this situation. That wasn't just an insult he threw out casually. That was a diagnosis of what he believed J. Prince's motivation was. He believed, and apparently still believes, that J. Prince saw an opportunity to use Youngboy's name to elevate his own relevance with a younger generation that might not be fully aware of Rap-A-Lot's history, like J. Prince needed the association more than Youngboy did. Whether that's accurate or not is almost beside the point. What matters is that Youngboy believes it. And when Youngboy believes something about somebody's character, it locks in. He doesn't give people the benefit of the doubt on those calls. Now let's get into the banned from Houston piece, because this is where J. Prince's institutional power makes itself felt in a very tangible way. And this is the detail that separates this beef from your standard rap industry drama. Youngboy being banned from Houston, or effectively being signaled that Houston is unwelcome territory, is a statement of power that very few people in the country could make stick. Because Houston is a city, you can't officially ban someone from a city, but you can make it known that someone who shows up there is going to face pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Legal, social, street, all of it coming at once. J. Prince has the kind of relationships in Houston that make that possible. He knows people in positions where they can make an artist's presence in that city legally complicated, professionally costly, and personally dangerous. A venue doesn't book you because of concerns. A promoter won't put your show on. And on the street side, the people who would normally provide security or safe passage in that city are aligned differently when J. Prince's name is in the conversation. That's a real ban, not a piece of paper, an environmental reality. And for Youngboy specifically, this hits differently because of his legal situation. He's been navigating federal supervision, house arrest conditions, travel restrictions. Adding a hostile environment in one of America's major cities, one with a highly active music scene and a fan base that would love to see him perform, is a professional limitation that costs real money and real reach. But here's where it gets crazy. Youngboy's response to being banned from Houston tells you everything about his mentality. He didn't try to negotiate. He didn't reach out through intermediaries to smooth things over. He essentially doubled down. Through his music, through his associations, through his silence on certain things and his loud declarations on others, the message from his camp has been clear. We don't need Houston's permission to be who we are. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless, depending on which side of this you're standing on. And the fact that it led to Ben 10 getting shot suggests that the recklessness assessment has some validity to it, because people in Youngboy's orbit are paying for this position with real consequences. Let's zoom out for a second, because this beef between J. Prince and Youngboy is actually a mirror of a much bigger conversation happening in hip-hop right now about who holds power and how that power is exercised. J. Prince represents a generation of executives and power brokers who built the industry through personal relationships, street credibility, and institutional connections. The Rap-A-Lot model. Control your masters, control your city, build relationships that extend beyond the music business, was revolutionary when he invented it, and it still works. But it's a model built on a certain kind of hierarchy, a respect structure where younger people acknowledge the power of those who came before. Youngboy represents something completely different. He's the poster child for the artist who bypasses every traditional power structure. No major label needed, no radio gatekeeper needed, no industry veteran cosign needed. He built his empire on direct-to-fan distribution and authentic street credibility, and he got there without bowing to anybody. When those two models meet, and they were always going to meet eventually, the collision is about more than just this specific beef. It's about whether the old hierarchy still has the power to enforce itself. Can J. Prince actually make Youngboy's life difficult enough that it changes how Youngboy moves? Or has Youngboy built such an independent infrastructure that traditional power moves don't land the same way? The answer seems to be somewhere complicated in the middle. J. Prince can absolutely make Houston a problem for Youngboy. He can affect venues, create street pressure, and the Ben 10 situation shows that people in Youngboy's world are being affected in the worst way possible. Those are real consequences, but Youngboy from Utah is still the most streamed artist in the game. The ban doesn't stop his music from reaching his fans. It doesn't stop the money. It doesn't stop the movement. The reach that J. Prince has is geographically and institutionally bound in ways that Youngboy's influence is not. And that asymmetry is actually what makes this beef so dangerous, because J. Prince can hurt Youngboy's people, but he can't fully stop Youngboy. And Youngboy's response to people being hurt in his world is always to escalate, not to negotiate, so the cycle has no obvious exit. So where does this leave us right now, gang? Because this is not a resolved situation. This is an ongoing, active, dangerous beef with real casualties already on the board. Ben 10 got shot. That's a fact that's sitting in the middle of this situation like a stone that nobody can pretend isn't there. Someone in Youngboy's circle got shot in a situation connected, through J. Prince's son's involvement, to this beef. That doesn't go away. That doesn't get smoothed over with a phone call or a handshake. In Youngboy's world, when your people get hurt, that's a permanent mark. That's something that gets referenced in lyrics, in conversations, in the way loyalty gets evaluated going forward. He's the type of artist who keeps receipts. Not just metaphorically, but literally through his music, which has always been his most honest form of communication. J. Prince, for his part, has maintained a certain kind of public posture about all of this. He's not the type to go on Instagram Live and have a screaming match. He's been doing this for 40 years, and he understands that the real moves happen away from the cameras. But his son's involvement in the situation that led to Ben 10 getting shot means that his family is now directly entangled in this. Not just his business reputation, not just his Houston influence, his bloodline. And that changes the calculus for J. Prince too, because when your son is making moves that escalate a beef and result in people getting shot, you're either defending that or you're addressing it internally. And J. Prince defending his son's actions, even implicitly through his silence, means he's co-signing an escalation that he may not be able to pull back from easily. The Houston music scene itself is watching this nervously, because J. Prince's influence has always been a protective umbrella over Houston rap in a certain sense. His relationships have kept certain problems at bay, but a prolonged, public, violent beef with someone of Youngboy's stature and Youngboy's reach drags Houston into a conflict that extends far beyond city limits. Youngboy has fans and affiliated people all over the country, people who take his beefs personally. There are also the business implications. Youngboy's fan base, active, aggressive in their support, and deeply loyal, has already been making noise about this situation online. The streams, the comments, the way NBA Youngboy's people move on social media, it's an organized force. J. Prince's institutional power doesn't necessarily translate into that kind of digital mobilization. Here's what this whole situation really comes down to at the core level. This is about two completely different definitions of power colliding in real time. J. Prince's power is vertical. It's built on hierarchy, on institutional relationships, on being the man that other powerful men know and respect. His influence flows from the top down, the connections he has to people with resources, legal authority, and street organization. That's a specific kind of power that has ruled certain parts of the rap game for decades. Youngboy's power is horizontal. It's built on mass, the sheer number of real people across the country who genuinely ride for him. Not because they've been organized to, not because they're being paid to, but because they authentically connect with his music and his story. That kind of power doesn't have a headquarters you can pressure. It doesn't have a phone number you can call to make it stop. When vertical power tries to press down on horizontal power, what usually happens is that the horizontal power spreads wider. The pressure doesn't eliminate it, it broadcasts it. Every move J. Prince makes that can be interpreted as aggression against Youngboy becomes content for Youngboy's supporters to rally around. The banned from Houston narrative, the robbery, the public post about the jewelry, all of it has become fuel. And when horizontal power tries to directly challenge vertical power, when Youngboy's camp makes moves in Houston that are read as disrespectful to J. Prince's authority, the vertical power deploys consequences that the horizontal power can't fully absorb. Ben 10 getting shot. Situations that are personal, immediate, and painful in a way that streaming numbers don't protect against. So you've got two powers that can each hurt the other, but neither can fully destroy the other. And in that kind of stalemate, the question becomes, who's willing to absorb more damage? Youngboy's entire brand is built on being unbothered, on taking loss and turning it into fuel, on being the one who doesn't need your city's permission, doesn't need your cosign, doesn't need your blessing. His entire positioning in the culture is predicated on showing that no external force can break him. If he backs down from J. Prince, if he tries to negotiate, make peace, acknowledge J. Prince's power, he undermines the entire mythology that his career is built on. J. Prince, on the other hand, has spent 40 years building a reputation as someone whose authority is not challenged without consequence. If Youngboy moves through this whole situation and comes out the other side with his independence intact and his music still dominating, if the banning doesn't stick, if the pressure doesn't register, then that's a statement about the limits of J. Prince's reach that other artists and executives are going to notice. Neither one of them can afford to lose this, and that's exactly why it keeps escalating. Y'all need to understand something. This situation is bigger than rap beef. This is bigger than a chain or a post or two powerful people having their egos bruised. Ben 10 got shot. That's real life. That's somebody's health, somebody's safety, somebody's future. The pattern in this situation, the robbery, the public response, the clout accusation, the escalation through J. Prince's son, the fight involving Youngboy's brother, the shooting, is a classic sequence of how these things spiral out of control. Each step feels like a proportional response to the last one. Each side feels justified, and the people at the center of the actual power, J. Prince, Youngboy, are still standing while people adjacent to them are catching the real smoke. That's always how it goes, fam. The generals don't take the bullets, the soldiers do. Real recognize real, and what I recognize in this situation is two men who are both legitimate in their own right, both with real legacies, both with real power, and who could theoretically coexist in the culture because there's enough room. But pride, positioning, and the politics of respect have turned a jewelry situation into something that's gotten people shot. The question the culture needs to be asking is not who's right and who's wrong. The question is, when does somebody with enough influence on either side decide that this particular war isn't worth the casualties? Because if history tells us anything about beefs at this level, when you've got this much pride, this much money, this much real-world consequence wrapped up in it, the answer to that question usually comes too late. Drop in the comments, who do you think moves wrong first in this situation? Was Youngboy right to read J. Prince's public post as clout chasing, or was J. Prince genuinely trying to help and got no credit? And do you think this thing ever gets resolved, or is Houston permanently closed to Youngboy? I'll be back with more. Stay up, gang.